Professor Smith is a graduate of the New York University School of Law and is a New York Times best-selling author. His two most recent books are First They Came for the Gun Owners and #Duped, How the Anti-Gun Lobby Exploits the Parkland School Shooting.
Today I want to talk to you about the Second Amendment and its role in protecting Main Street America. When I talk about Main Street, I'm talking about the economic centers of nearly all communities, which might include things like grocery stores, gas stations, and pharmacies. You see, since May 2020, we've seen looting, vandalism, and arson in many American cities. These riots are a direct and dangerous threat not only to private property, but to the individual freedoms and economic prosperity that we as Americans have enjoyed. These events are shocking. But there's even something else more shocking to me, and that is, in many parts of the United States, an individual might not be permitted to use a firearm legally to stop rioters from destroying his home, his business, or his community, unless, of course, there exists an imminent threat to human life. In other words, you might be barred from using your firearm if all you're trying to do is protect private property. Now let's briefly discuss the origins of this general rule. In the 18th century, at America's founding, organized group violence was a reality. For those who lived on the nation's frontier, for example, Indian raids were a fact of life. The laws of many colonies actually required that the colonists carry firearms in order to repel organized group attacks. During oral argument in the famous Heller versus the District of Columbia Supreme Court case in 2008, now retired Justice Anthony Kennedy actually discussed specifically the importance of firearms in thwarting Indian raids at America's founding period. This made a lot of sense because under English common law, generally in effect throughout the colonies, an individual had the right to defend his property against robbery, arson, and burglary, including by the use of deadly force. In fact, in a very famous example, Founding Father James Wilson and a series of other men defended Mr. Wilson's home by using firearms against an armed mob. But after the 18th century, gradually over time, with the development of professional police forces, Americans slowly but surely gave away certain rights to the state regarding the use of force. In return, the state or the government agreed to protect our private property from criminality, including from mob violence. As a result, today in most states, Americans are not generally permitted to use deadly force to protect private property alone. Now, at a certain level, this makes a lot of sense, right? I mean, most of us can agree that one should not shoot someone for stealing a pair of sneakers or a cell phone. But this logic begins to falter when confronted by today's new reality. That is, an America where gangs of looters seek to destroy Main Street, which of course is the economic infrastructure that most Americans rely upon to live their lives. In my view, the public policy problem appears to be that the law treats all private property largely the same, regardless of the specific property's centrality to the social order or to its importance to the community at large. Now, this presents a potentially dangerous problem to society for at least two reasons. First, it renders powerless millions of Americans who may be forced to witness the destruction of their hometowns by violent groups composed often of outsiders with no connection to the community at all. And second, it also risks giving criminals virtual carte blanche to destroy the economic infrastructure essential to our communities without any effective or legally permitted way to stop them from doing so ahead of time. So how did we get here? Well, I think we got to this situation because the fundamental assumptions underlying our current legal landscape are no longer universally true. It used to be the case that if there were a group of violent thugs coming to loot or destroy your town, then there'd be a consensus across the political spectrum condemning such lawlessness, and that the police would show up to thwart the rioters before they destroyed your home or your building. But today, we can no longer rely on the sanctity of private property or that the police will thwart property crimes before they occur. And so we necessarily have to re-examine the laws surrounding the defense of property, given that the long-standing assumptions supporting these laws are no longer universally true or accepted. Now, do you think I'm exaggerating this problem? After all, let's just take a look at Minneapolis this year. In Minneapolis, nearly 1,500 businesses were damaged or destroyed by riots. These private property included everything from mom and pop shops to hospitals to grocery stores. In contrast, during the Detroit, Michigan riots in 1967, despite partisan differences, the Republican governor of Michigan, George Romney, that's Mitt Romney's father, cooperated with the liberal Democrat president, Lyndon Johnson, to bring order back to Detroit. Governor Romney deployed the National Guard, and LBJ deployed the 82nd and the 101st Airborne under the Insurrection Act of 1807 to quash the riots. But today, in contrast, many local political leaders, such as mayors and governors, are refusing to cooperate with federal law enforcement in order to quell the riots we are seeing across America. In fact, it seems that in many instances, the protection of law-abiding Americans is simply not their priority. Now, the good news is that there is precedent for changing the laws regarding the use of deadly force with firearms when the circumstances warrant it. In recent years, many states have added things like the Castle Doctrine and Stand Your Ground statutes, as well as the addition of constitutional carry laws to their law books, all in order to level the playing field between the law-abiding citizen and the criminals. But these laws do not directly address the protection of private property. As a result, we need to revisit the rules of engagement that govern the defense of property against mob violence. Whether the right solution ultimately is to restore traditional American law or perhaps to create new legal standards, I don't know. But the potential risks to Americans and to our society that arise from mob violence must be addressed. To get this conversation started, I have two observations for you to consider. First, Americans gave up some of our rights to use force against criminals in exchange for an agreement with the government that the police would show up to protect us and our property. Today, unfortunately, this long-standing social contract has been shredded by some state and local governmental officials. So the question that I have for you is this. When the government fails to protect private property, essential to American life, should Americans have the legal right to defend that property by lethal force if necessary? And if the police won't protect your town square from being destroyed by a mob, then can ordinary Americans step into the void left by government inaction and take action? Second, I want to talk about the Second Amendment itself. Well, the U.S. Supreme Court has interpreted the meaning of the Second Amendment by applying a text, history, and tradition test, which asked, how was the language of that amendment understood at the time of America's founding? As I've already explained, when America was founded, individuals had the right to use deadly force to protect property against group or mob violence. So the question is now the time to restore traditional American law and norms allowing the use of firearms to defend against violent group attacks on property and the foundations of our civilization? To conclude, what I've discussed today sounds like a problem that would occur in an unstable third world country and not here in the United States. But the problem is here and it's now, and it may be coming to your main street soon. While I would much prefer that the police and local government officials do their job of maintaining civil order, this is no longer guaranteed. When the police cannot or will not show up, should law-abiding Americans have the means and legal authority to defend themselves, their property, and their hometowns? Civilized society, ordered liberty, and the American way of life all hang in the balance. Thank you.
Hi everyone, it's Beth Bauman, Associate Editor at Town Hall. I'm so happy to be here with you, even if it's virtually and not in person. With the election cycle coming up, I know we always hear that this is the most important election of our lifetimes, but I truly believe that November 3rd will be a very, very important election, if nothing else, for gun rights, for the Second Amendment, and for people like you and I who love and value our right to keep and bear arms. As we see things throughout the country play out, especially in places like Portland and Seattle, Kenosha, We're reminded every day of why we fight for this right and why our founding fathers saw it as such a sacred right to protect it in the Constitution. We know that people like Joe Biden and Kamala Harris want to take our guns. They say we wear our tinfoil hats, that we're being paranoid, but look at what they have repeatedly said. Biden is happy about the assault weapons ban that was passed. Kamala Harris, when she was running for president, said that in the first 100 days, if Congress failed to act on gun violence, that she would be willing to sign an executive order calling for things like universal background checks and making it more difficult for law-abiding gun owners to possess the firearms that we've always had. And so this election cycle is even more important than the last time, because this really does change the course of how our country is going. And to make matters even worse, we have the mainstream media who is doing nothing but acting as an arm of the Democratic Party. We hear them time and time again go to bat for Biden and Harris and the Democrats. I mean, we recently had Chris Murphy, the senator from Connecticut, tell us that America has always been a violent place, and because of that, Americans shouldn't have firearms, because that just makes our violence even worse. If you ask me, if you ask my neighbors in Idaho, if you ask your neighbors wherever you're at, they're going to tell you they feel safer and more secure because they have a gun, because they have the ability to defend themselves and their family. And sometimes it's not even necessarily about self-defense, but it's about hunting and providing for your family, for ranchers and farmers. It's about protecting livestock from predators. But we hear these things about, how terrible it is that we value this right. And what do we see? We see people on MSNBC and CNN and NPR saying that there's all these high capacity assault weapons and we need to get them off the street to prevent shootings and except these people, most of them sit up in their fancy schwanky offices in New York and DC and tell those of us who live in flyover, those of us who don't live in the inner cities, what it's like to shoot this, fully semi-automatic weapon and how it's more deadly. These are the people who are going to bat for the Democrats and for people like Biden and Harris, who've made it very, very clear that they want to get rid of this right. They don't want to protect it. They say they stand up for the Constitution, and what is the first thing they propose doing? Making universal background checks happen, which you and I know doesn't do anything to make things safe. It just makes it harder for you and I to do things like help domestic violence survivors. If I have a friend who is fearful for her life because her husband was beating up on her, if universal background checks were in place, I would be a criminal. She would be a criminal if I lent her my firearm to protect herself, simply because the government wasn't in between this interaction and wasn't there to say, you're not a criminal and neither are you, so good job, you're good to go. These are the very, very real things that have been talked about, and we hear it spewed by the media who seems to think they know us, they understand us, and they don't. What do? They continually demonize us. They continually say that, we're white supremacists, that we want nothing more than to hurt people of color, that we're all just crazy gun-toting lunatics, and that's the furthest thing from the truth. The reality is we're just average Americans who want to make sure that we're safe. And quite honestly, with all of the chaos that has erupted across the country, it's not a surprise that more and more people are deciding to utilize their Second Amendment rights. Every single month since this pandemic has started, we have seen an uptick in new gun ownership, primarily amongst women. And I truly believe that what we're going to see in November is a lot of millennial women my age who are going to stand up and say they've had enough. They're tired of living in fear. They want to be able to go to the grocery store and feel safe. They want to be able to go about their day and their lives and know that they're not going to have a riot break out down the street, that their small business is going to survive. And what that comes down to is people like you and I saying we've had enough. The silent majority can't be silent anymore. It is time for each and every one of us to stand up and say, we're done. We've had enough. We aren't going to take this anymore. We're not going to allow these politicians who have armed security to say that we don't have a right to defend ourselves unless they can afford to have each and every one of us with armed security. Then they need to be quiet, because how many of these people are like Shannon Watts from Moms Demand Action, who have armed security while they protest and while they advocate taking away our rights? Not every one of us has that luxury. In fact, she's in the small minority who does. So I would really encourage you all to stand up, have a voice, and say enough is enough. Gun owners, we did this last time. We are the reason that Hillary Clinton didn't succeed in 2016. And we'll be the reason that Biden and Harris don't succeed come November. But it's really, really important that we welcome new gun owners, that we encourage them to get trained, that we offer them resources that we have. Because every single new person that we welcome to our movement is another person that the mainstream media and the legacy media is going to come after, and it's another person that bucks their narrative. It's another person that tells them they can sit in their high rise and tell us what life is like in the middle of America, but we're here and we're living it. And until they know what it's like to walk a mile in our shoes, then they need to stop vilifying us, and they need to stop acting like they know us and understand us and care about us, because they don't. All they're doing is acting as an arm of the Democratic Party and the DNC, and we've had enough. Thank you so much for having me. For those of you who don't know me, feel free to follow my work on townhall.com under the tip sheet section, on Twitter at EB454, on Facebook, Parler at Beth Bauman. And thank you so much to the Second Amendment Foundation for all you do for our rights. You guys really are unsung heroes in this fight. You fight every single day in court, and the work you do does not go unnoticed, and we appreciate it. Thank you so much.
Second Amendment Foundation speech in 3, 2, 1. Before I get going today, I'd better recognize a fact that embarrasses me. Mainstream media doesn't believe in the Second Amendment. It doesn't believe in your right to own a gun. There, I've said it. And I also have to admit they stack the deck when it comes to Second Amendment reporting. Makes me angry, but not just because I'm a gun owner. It makes me angry because I've invested a half century of my life, 50 years, into being a reporter and journalism. I believe in it, but I've been a hunter, a shooter, and a gun owner, even longer than that. When I got started in journalism, there were only 7 questions. It was critical that I answered every time. Who, what, why, when, where, how, and how much. If I answered those questions, I'd done a good job. Journalists, believe it or not, have a creed. That may even surprise today's journalists. Here's a part of what it says and a part of what I believe. The public journalism, is a public trust. Clear thinking and clear statement, accuracy and fairness are fundamentals of good journalism. Suppression of the news for any reason is indefensible. There's more, but here's what's important. What that creed means is anyone who refers to a modern sporting rifle as a machine gun or a riot is mostly peaceful when they're standing in front of a fire isn't being a journalist. They're lying to the public. Inaccuracy and a lack of fairness disqualifies you from journalism. If you feature people not wearing masks at a Trump rally, and you don't mention the fact that police officers are being blinded by lasers at these mostly peaceful demonstrations, you're not a journalist, you're a propagandist. There's a big difference. But that's the world we live in today, folks. Gun owners and the Second Amendment are under attack in the media and in business. And that attack is worse right now because the one thing, the one person on earth they dislike more than a gun owner is Donald Trump. If Donald Trump's for the Second Amendment, they're against it. Period. That's the end of the discussion. And they're being supported by corporate leaders who agree with their position that no one, except maybe their security team, really needs to own a gun. They consider themselves smarter, more informed, more socially aware, more woke, if you will, than the rest of us. They really believe that they know what's best for you, even if you disagree. In business, they talk about making up for injustice, but they deny credit to long-term customers who happen to be in the gun business, or they go up to them and encourage them to find another bank. In real estate, not so long ago, banks and mortgage companies redlined cities. Outside the red line, loans were easy to get. Inside them, you were high risk, no loans for you. It was economic discrimination, pure and simple. It was always wrong, but today it's illegal. But on the same token, 5 years ago, the Obama administration quietly authorized Operation Choke Point. It was an attempt by federal banking regulators to pressure banks to deny service to undesirable businesses, the ones that weren't in the acceptable businesses. That included gun companies. The Trump administration killed the plan. But federal bureaucrats are very persistent, and they're really hard to fire. Today, there are banks that will not process credit cards for gun companies, but they process porn sites all day long. And the regulators let them get away with it. It's woke discrimination, folks, but it's the world we live in today. Last September, chief executives from 145 companies wrote a letter to the Senate demanding a passage of universal background checks and red flag laws. You can call them whatever you want. It's enhanced gun control. But what was most disturbing was not the fact that they were being woke about it. It was the fact they called gun violence a public health crisis. That terminology should concern every gun owner. A public health crisis is far easier to regulate or eliminate than your right. Convince average people that owning a gun means you may have a mental problem and you've been demonized. Demonization is this next step before being outlawed or eliminated. Marginalize, demonize, and eliminate. That's the lather, rinse, repeat process that dictators have used to get rid of opposition through history. As supporters of the Second Amendment, We have to do something about media and business bias. Business discrimination is a part of taking away our rights. And our rights, all of them, are protected by the Second Amendment. Because if you're unarmed, folks, rights become privileges. Privileges can be revoked. So what do? That's easy. Vote. Vote just like your life depends on it. But not just at the ballot box. Vote with your wallet. Don't buy Levi's. Don't ride Uber. Don't shop at Dick's. And politely tell the local store manager why you won't be shopping there. As gun owners, we've not done a very good job of demonstrating the fact that we're no different from their other neighbors. And for years, the NRA has done the majority of the work protecting the Second Amendment on a national level. And they've done a good job, except for one key area. As long as I've been a national reporter, closing in on 41 years now, the NRA has used a scorched earth policy. It never did anything except attack the media. The good they did was offset by those attacks. See, the NRA didn't believe in conversation. It fed off confrontation. That created a heck of an opening for the anti-gun movement. You see, they don't use facts to make their point. They use emotion. And emotion works way better than facts when you're talking about sound bites in interviews. They rolled out smooth talkers and easy to digest, simple to understand, and inaccurate talking points. But they've used them to eat our proverbial lunch when it comes to making a case for fairness in the media. But right now, today, we have an opportunity to flip the narrative. Nervousness about the immediate future has created about 5 million first-time gun owners. That's as many members as the NRA. They're people who would never associate with a gun group. Some of them are city dwellers. They would have never considered a gun until the mostly peaceful protests broke out. They're soccer moms, the same ones who supported Dick's, but now they're worried about getting back and forth to soccer practice safely. They're the grandparents who realize calling 911 doesn't stop a home invasion. They're young, they're single, they're men, women, others who realize just minding your own business won't protect you anymore. Amazingly enough, some of these 5 million new gun buyers are members of the media. Now don't at that. I've talked to them, and it makes them very uncomfortable. But they're starting to understand that their accepted truth just might not be as truthful as they thought it was. They're seeing that the NRA just might have been right when they said the only answer for a bad guy with a gun was a good guy with a gun who knew how to use it. You know, that's the opportunity. We can flip the narrative. And if we do, mainstream media and businesses will either shape up or they'll be replaced in a new mainstream. It's already happening with the internet. People don't take everything the media tells them seriously anymore, and that's good. It's always good to question, but we can accelerate the pace. That's why we have to welcome all new gun owners without bias, without any preconceived notions. And I guarantee you they're not all going to look, sound, talk, or act like us. But that's why they're so important. And you know, that's something I'm looking forward to seeing and helping happen as a journalist. Thank you, Second Amendment Foundation, for giving me the opportunity to talk to you. God bless you. God bless the viewers. God bless your work. And God bless the United States of America. Thanks.
Welcome inside Armed American Radio's Video Network studios. This is the studio where we bring Armed American Radio's Daily Defense, Monday through Friday, the weekday show from 4 to 5 p.m. Eastern, 1 to 2 p.m. Pacific, to the nation, and of course Sunday's Big Monster Cast on Sundays from 8 to 11 p.m. Eastern, 5 to 8 p.m. Pacific. to the nation. And I'd like to welcome you inside Armed American Radio studios with me today for what is kind of a strange gun rights policy conference this year. I think you would agree with me, the fact that we're virtual this year rather than sitting face to face. I would have much rather have been there in the room with you, feeling the energy coming from each of you in the room when we speak together every single year. But you know what? This will work, and it's a very bizarre time, and I think we're reaching probably more people in this format than maybe we would have if we were face to face. So again, as a member of the Board of Directors of the Citizens Committee for the Right to Keep and Bear Arms, welcome. It's great to be here with you today. A couple things a little bit different this year. Normally, I sit on the panel with A.W.R. Hawkins, Stephen Gutowski, and myself, and we talk about gun rights from a media perspective. This year, I've been moved over to the panel with Jim Shepard and Beth Bauman, my good friend from Town Hall, and we're talking about corporate and media attacks against the Second Amendment. Now, if you've ever listened to me speak or listened to my radio programs over the years, you know my utter disdain for the mainstream press. I talk about it and focus on that topic a lot, not just here at GRPC, but on my radio program as well. Because you see, I believe that we can tie most of the ills that are ill in this nation back to a mainstream press and their hateful rhetoric and treasonous, quite frankly, reporting on America, not just America, but in particular our gun rights. We'll focus on that. Over the last few years, I've had some fun and had the opportunity to mention to you that while I prepare these speeches every year for the Gun Rights Policy Conference, I generally wind up throwing it up, rolling it out, and chucking it out and throwing it away. I roll it up into a ball and throw it away. I didn't get disappointed again this year. I put off submitting this for a little bit longer than I should have, and probably a little bit longer than the folks at the Second Amendment Foundation wanted me to, because I was waiting for that sign. Lo and behold, that sign came in the form of a tweet. Not a tweet, but it was actually an Instagram post that was put up by a relative of mine just a couple days ago, and I thought, here it is. Thank you, Lord, for providing me yet again an opportunity to talk about gun rights, not just based on what I talk about in the past, but from something that actually happened, to me in real life. I am convinced that the good Lord throws these things to me for a purpose and for a reason. Let me switch my glasses out here so I can switch from the computer glasses to read what's on my phone. And this was an actual Instagram post that came to me just a couple days ago from a relative, I will leave it at that, who has apparently or unfortunately moved over to the dark side. Let me read this for you. It says, vote as if your skin is not white, your parents need medical care, your spouse is an immigrant, your land is on fire, your child is transgender, your house is flooded, your sister is a victim of gun violence, your brother is gay, your water is unsafe, because privilege has no place in an election, but empathy does. So I'm supposed to read that as somehow everything that I've achieved in my life is because of the color of my skin, not because of my actions, my attitude, my perseverance, my skills, and my just flat out damn hard work. I don't care about virtually everything that's on that tweet. People have a right to live their lives any way they want. Makes no difference to me in any way, shape, or form. But I did focus on the one that said, vote as if my sister were a victim of gun violence, which is exactly what I'm going to do, and which is exactly what I'm going to ask each and every single one of you to do as we are attacked by the mainstream media, as we are attacked by corporate America. And I've got enough time to cover both of those as I segue from this point here. Because you see, in my world, if my sister were attacked or a victim of gun violence because of an attack, etc., I want my sister to be armed. That's the way I view the world. I don't want my sister to be defenseless. I don't want my mother to be defenseless. I don't want my daughter to be defenseless. I don't want your daughter, your mother, or your sister or grandmother to be defenseless either. And that if my sister were in fact a victim of gun violence, I would hope that we could take this opportunity to learn from it and do what millions upon millions upon millions of other Americans are also doing right now in light of this ultra-progressive, hateful, quite frankly, Instagram post that's circulating. all about gender, all about race, all about identity politics. Again, I'm not going to focus on that. I want to focus on the firearm aspect of it. Because if that were the case, and millions upon millions of Americans agree with me now, that if that were the case, I think that's why they're arming themselves in record numbers. Because they don't want to be a victim of gun violence. They see what's happening in our cities. So let's use that to pivot now, if you will, to the mainstream press. For many years, I've talked about how dangerous the mainstream media is, not by virtue of what they tell us. We're smart enough to figure out what fake news is if it's told to us. If, in fact, they actually give us the story, we can discern right from wrong. We're smart enough, and I have faith in my fellow Americans, that when we're given something to read or listen to or hear, we are smart enough to make our own decision and say, you know what, I call BS on that. That's fake news. Or I don't agree with that. Or I do agree with that, whatever the case may be. But the worst attack the mainstream media perpetrates on all of us as American citizens is the lie of omission. Now, if you think back just about a month ago to the Democrat National Committee or to the Democrat National Convention, the Democrats failed. Every single speaker for 4 straight days failed to mention the violence gripping the city where Bellevue, Washington is a suburb of Seattle. Failed to mention the violence gripping Chicago, Illinois every single day. Failed to mention the violence gripping Philadelphia, Baltimore, St. Louis, and let's not forget Portland, Oregon, that's been on fire for months since the death of George Floyd. This is no longer about George Floyd. This is about the destruction of America and our constitutional rights and our values that all of us hold dear. So you, like myself, understand because we know these things are occurring. But the rest of America isn't getting the message. Why? Because the Democrat machine, along with ABC, NBC, CBS, MSDNC, CNN, and others, simply aren't telling Americans the truth. Fortunately, we have internet. Fortunately, we have a president who has the bully pulpit, who understands these things and can get the word out. And hopefully that word is getting out. Because I've often said on my radio program for many, many years, show me an American city in decay, and I'll show you an American city run by gun-grabbing Democrats at every level for decades. It is impossible to prove me wrong. The mainstream media attacks our rights and attacks our freedoms by failing to tell the truth about our right to bear arms and what's happening. But that message is getting out, as evidenced by millions of Americans setting records with gun purchases who want no part of that dismal, hateful, communist, Marxist gun-grabbing agenda. As gun control crumbles underneath their feet, they're spending more and more money to keep it in front of us. That will be a subject here throughout the day, I'm sure. Now, corporate America, quickly, working in conjunction and in unison with the mainstream press, hates our guts. Over 145 CEOs have begged Congress, Senate in particular, for more gun control. The CCR-KBA has put out a list of gun-unfriendly businesses, and I ask each and every one of you, while our lives are intertwined with many of these companies, it's hard not to do business with them, that we attempt to, the best ability that we can. And each and every one of us vote this year as if our sisters were victims of gun violence. Thanks for being here. I wish I had more time with you. I'll see each and every one of you on the radio.
Hello everyone, I'm Derek LeBlanc, president of the KidSafe Foundation. The KidSafe Foundation is a 501c3 nonprofit based in Oregon. We teach firearm safety and accident prevention to kids. Since our founding back in 2016, we reached about 21,000 kids in 4 states and taught them life-saving skills if they were ever to come across an unsecured firearm. I'm going to miss seeing all of you guys this year. 2020 has been a year for the record books. We have seen record new firearm sales, record new first-time gun ownership, and we can turn on the news daily to see why a 30-round magazine is more relevant than it ever has been before. We are seeing before our very eyes why gun control is the greatest hoax ever perpetrated upon the American people. we can now see how it's truly about control and never about the safety of the public. In the state of Oregon, we are seeing guns fly off the shelves only to be held up in the background check process. This process could easily take a new gun owner a week or two to take possession of a new firearm. Fear, hopelessness, being unprepared has put many in a vulnerable situation. People that never thought they would own firearms are now on our team. Now the work begins for all of us as advocates. How do we turn this moment into something that will actually stop, reverse the progress of the other side? In the past few months, we've seen Everytown, Moms Demand Action, and other groups show their true intentions, which is to disarm the American people, yet actually lose momentum due to the pandemic and the societal unrest. We are watching them struggle to control their followers because their followers had that light bulb moment that they might need a firearm to protect their families. This is our moment as advocates. As my late father would say, we have to make hay as when the sun shines. We have to hone our message. We have to be inviting to new gun owners. Welcome those who are not like us, yet share this newfound support for the 2A. We must convert those into votes. This is the most important election of our lifetimes. Our freedoms and rights to lawfully defend our families are literally hanging in the balance. We are in a very unique position, though. If done properly, we can make progress to stem the tide of gun control. The pandemic and lawlessness is proving the need for a firearm for lawful self-defense. Those that have never thought they would own a gun are now realizing the importance of the 2A. They are realizing that it wasn't written about hunting. This is a huge victory for us as advocates. Hopefully, we can turn this into positive momentum. It is way past our time to move the needle forward. How do we do this, though? Well, as educators, influencers, activists, and advocates, it's our job to create a unified message, one that crosses all lines of society. We can unite by showing how relevant our 2A rights are now currently as the country devolves into chaos. We have to be in a position to lead. We have to be welcoming. Gone are the days that as men, we can recommend revolvers to women. Gone are the days where we can see skin color or sexual orientation. We have to evolve as a 2A community. The country is desperately looking for leadership, and now is our time to be part of the solution. My lane is with women, children, and families. Women are definitely an underrepresented part of the 2A community, and my goal is to empower them. The children are our future. They need protection and education as well. Our children are future voters and future leaders. Teaching them safety, discipline, and respect for firearms will go a long way to protect our 2A rights. Teaching our kids that guns are normal and should be viewed that way will be the way going forward. We have a rich history based on being armed from the very founding of this country. It's important our children know the reason for our 2A. This will ensure the next generation will grow to love, support, and protect it. Advocacy can begin at a very young age. It all starts with safety. Once a foundation of safety is introduced, then respect and appreciation can be instilled. Families can enjoy time together, bonding and reinforcing freedoms that we enjoy. Involving our youth is critical to advancing our way of life. We all come from different walks of life, have different experiences, but what we do share is that we are all Americans. We all share a God-given right to self-defense and our ability to exercise our constitutionally protected rights together for now. Now let's work together to get everybody involved to protect our rights, because together we can affect the change that we need. Thank you.
Hi everyone, my name is Mike and I'm the host of Arms Room Radio, and welcome to the Gun Rights Policy Conference. I'm here to talk to you about advancing the gun rights message through traditional media. As I said, my name's Mike. I'm the host of Arms Room Radio. And before we get started, I'd like to thank Mr. Gottlieb and all of his people here for finding a way in this weird world of COVID times to get us through the Gun Rights Policy Conference. Again, I'm going to talk to you about how to spread the gun rights message through traditional media. there's three definitions or three examples that I use of traditional media. You know, we all know the internet and webs and the inner world and all that. So we're just going to talk about some older school stuff. Newspapers or print media, radio, and television. Now I kind of do the radio, so I'm going to skip that and save radio and TV for the last. I want to talk to you about how to get your gun rights message into newspaper and print. First thing you have to do is have a resume, okay? I'm going to give you some tips on doing a resume here. You have to have this resume in order to present yourself to a newspaper, to an organization that publishes an actual physical piece of paper to put in your hands. Otherwise, they're just not going to pay attention to you. So the first couple of things you do on your resume, they're pretty simple. Listen, I'm an attendee at a gun rights policy conference, whether it's last year's, whether it's this year's digitally, or all the many years in between. Next, are you a member of any organizations? That's a pretty simple one. I'm a member of Second Amendment Foundation. And by the way, if you're not a member of the Second Amendment Foundation, you're wrong. You need to stop what you're doing right now, pause the TV, go fill out your Second Amendment Foundation, and then come back to us when you're done. Okay? Welcome back. Thank you. You should be a member of your local state organization or maybe another national organization as well. If you're a license holder, do you have a concealed weapons license? How many states do you have a concealed weapons license in? See, those are the kind of things that builds a resume. Now from there, you take your resume and you want to get in somewhere, you want to get into a newspapers. Now most local newspapers have, I call them the rags in there, your little local magazines that only are seen in your neighborhood. Those are the kind of places that are desperate to hear from the community to put ads or to put articles in newspapers. Why not you? You've got your resume. You know what your qualifications are. Let's talk to those people at the newspapers and see what they have to say. Now you send them your article, and I'm going to tell you this right now. This is one of the big ones. If you're going to write an article for one of your local magazines or local newspapers, you better not have it posted on your Facebook page. You better not have it posted on your Instagram or anywhere else. They want original work. So you can practice all you want with your diction and your dialect on Facebook, but save your written works there for the newspaper that you're going to submit. Proofread, okay? Before you send anything in, you better proofread it. And you better have several other people proofread it for you as well. If you don't know the difference between there, and there, don't bother sending it. Have somebody look at it for you ahead of time, and then they can help you out with it. Have your kid's English teacher look at it. Have somebody take a look at it for you. Make sure the message is correct, and make sure the diction is correct in it as well. You may want to check with your local organization. If you're going to be saying something about gun rights and gun rights policy, check with SAF, check with Florida Carry, check with Georgia Carry, whoever you happen to be a member of, and make sure that the message is right with them. Once you're in there and once you've got a couple of items in print, then you can move on to either radio or television. And those are pretty simple to do. Once you're established, again, you're as a writer, you start calling the radio shows, let them know you've been a subject matter expert on this topic and you can lend advice to them. Same thing with local news. You could see local news articles. They always interview somebody at a gun store. I'll tell you what, a lot of gun store owners, they don't like to be on TV. They don't want the popularity. But they wouldn't mind some publicity of somebody else in their store. I know you all know somebody in a gun store somewhere. So talk to them. Maybe you could let the news media know that you're available for comment inside a gun store. They love that backdrop. It's all about what they see. So again, just to wrap, there's different ways for you to get in. I'm going to talk to you this first way again about newspapers. That's what I want you to focus on this year. Next year when we sit back down, we'll move back a little bit further into how to get into television, how to get into the radio. So until then, this is Mike from Arms Room Radio. And I look forward to seeing you guys back here next year and the next event. Hi, this is Mike from Arms Room Radio. Just want to take a moment to talk to you about snow blindness in cats. It's affecting more and more cats every year, and frankly, it scares the living crap out of us. Hi, this is Mike from Arms Room Radio. We like to have a lot of fun on the radio, but today we want to talk to you about something serious. Packs of stray dogs that control most of the major cities.
Hitler was a great guy with a great plan. I love the smell of Zyklon in the morning. Not enough Jews bit the curb. This is why I don't trust kikes. These are only a fraction of the messages I receive on a daily basis from individuals around the world who taunt me as I educate like-minded Americans on their Second Amendment rights, especially those in the Jewish communities across the United States. But the hate is not just aimed at me. It's aimed at Jews everywhere. History is repeating itself, and the vast majority are turning a blind eye. From New York to California, anti-Semitic attacks are becoming commonplace. The media barely reports on the shootings, stabbings, and beatings perpetrated on the Jewish communities. Politicians like Ilhan Omar, Rashida Tlaib, and Bill de Blasio show their true colors and don't even try to hide their blatant anti-Semitism. We have celebrities who promote anti-Semitic conspiracy theories without consequence and who are not held accountable for their vitriol. History is repeating itself and the world remains silent. Because after all, it's only the Jews. You must understand that anti-Semitism is here in America. According to the FBI statistics in 2018, a staggering 57% of hate crimes in the country are against Jews. But in the United States, no matter how dangerous it gets for Jews, there are two factors that give us the ability to thrive: freedom-loving Americans, and more importantly, the Second Amendment. You see, I go by the moniker the Pew Jew, and it's been one of my goals not only to defend the Second Amendment, but strengthen it. My aim is to educate Jews on their freedoms, especially pertaining to their Second Amendment rights. The problem is Jews have a reputation of being anti-gun. It's understandable. While some of the most ardent and vocal gun control proponents tend to be Jewish, they do not represent the Jews of America. Understand that many Jews in America are pro-gun and pro-Second Amendment. We understand and appreciate that this great country recognizes the God-given right for us to be able to defend our lives and liberties through the Second Amendment. And it's because of that, I'm calling on American Jews who value their freedoms to not only own firearms and learn how to use them properly, but to get involved in defending our Second Amendment. The Jewish people have a rich history of fierce warriors. From Abraham battling the four kingdoms to King David and the Maccabees to the Warsaw Ghetto Uprising, Jewish history is flush with numerous examples of heroic figures taking up arms against tyranny. Even Jacob, the father of the Jewish people, prepared for battle against a brother who was hell-bent on killing him. We have been warriors since the beginning of time, and we must reclaim that title. But it does take commitment. It's not enough to be a gun owner. Without the Second Amendment, the right to defend yourself, your family, or your place of worship is weakened. The ability to ensure your freedom vanishes. There is a reason why America's founding fathers placed the God-given right to self-defense as the Second Amendment, and not the 3rd, 4th, 10th, or so on. Remove the ability for people to defend themselves or to rise up against tyranny, and you create slaves and subjects. Those who attack and try to abolish the Second Amendment are trying desperately to create an atmosphere that we saw 75 years ago in Germany. Power and control are their goal. To take away our ability to defend ourselves is to take away our life. That is why Jews need to join the ranks of freedom-loving Americans and enter the fight in defending the most important amendment. Generally, we are judged for things we do, but more often than not, we should be judged for things we don't do. We, as American Jews, mustn't stay silent while our natural right to self-defense is stripped away. Those who choose to sit back and do nothing are complicit to eroding our right to defend ourselves and loved ones. America is made up of countless people from all walks of life. Together, we the people of America make up what the Second Amendment calls the militia. I am a Jew. I am an American. I am the people. I am the militia.
Hello, I'm Freddie Reel, the editor-in-chief of AmmoLand Shooting Sports News. I want to thank Alan Gottlieb for inviting me to speak at this year's virtual Gun Rights Policy Conference. It's always an honor to be included in such an important event in the battle for our right to keep and bear arms. I was asked to comment on some examples of what the average person can do to help protect and defend our precious Second Amendment, but as an individual activist. I have two primary tactics, one of which you probably participate in every day, and we all know that first one as social media. And whether that is on Facebook, Twitter, or an online forum, or the comment section of your local newspaper, this is still the place where most of the world, especially our younger generation, gets their news and information from daily. So it is very important that you get on these platforms and repost positive pro-gun news from sites like ours at ammoland.com. Then look for others that agree with you and reshare their posts and even create your own rant, or should I say op-ed, talking about the issues and why they are important. We need an overwhelming number of voices, all preaching from our cause in multiple platforms across the internet to beat the biased tech giants at their own game. Remember, they can't ban all of us, as they need us to use their systems for them to make money. The second tactic is more challenging but can reap huge rewards if you're willing to persevere and see the efforts through. I'm talking about taking the fight straight to governments and politicians with the help of some of our local Second Amendment organizations and their teams of pro-gun lawyers. I'm talking about keeping a watchful eye on your local, state, and municipal governments or school and county boards, as well as your state officials. If you see something happening that you feel is an affront to our right to keep and bear arms, send a heads up by email to GOA or SAF, or place a call to your local Rifle and Pistol Association or state pro-gun group. Explain the issue. They may be completely unaware of what is going on at the local level. It's hard to keep tabs on every branch of government. If they agree with you, let them know you are willing to be an active participant working to stop whatever the challenge is, but you need guidance. Also, let them know that you're willing to participate in legal action to get it stopped. I have two good examples that we at AmmoLand News have reported on in this past year. After contacting local attorneys at the suggestion of GOA, Virginia resident John Crump recently joined a lawsuit against his anti-gun governor, you all know him, Ralph Northam, alleging the governor's gun control measures, specifically the closure of local gun ranges, violated Crump's rights, and essentially the rights of every other Commonwealth gun owner. In another instance, citizen Don McDougal of California, through his contacts with the local Friends of NRA chapter, made national news when he was named lead plaintiff in a federal lawsuit against California's Ventura County, challenging the shutdown of gun dealers during the pandemic. Both of these actions by single individuals help delay or stop the bad policy moves and defend your right to keep and bear arms. 2020 has been an unbelievable year, and the madness is not over yet. My advice is to stay informed, unafraid to take action, and remain very well armed and, most of all, dangerous.
Are you engineers ready? Okay, good. Here we go. Hello, friends and colleagues. I'm Alan Corwin, editor of the Bill of Rights Sentinel, the newsletter of JPFO, Jews for the Preservation of Firearms Ownership. Founded in 1989 by Aaron Zellman, his mission and ours is to make good on that long name with our nationwide presence. The ownership of the firearms you now have or want to get is in great peril from both political parties. Democrats have introduced this bill to basically confiscate every gun you have using deceptive and hidden clauses I'll describe in just a moment. And Republicans have failed to raise an alarm, alert you to what's happening, or demand retractions of this grossly unconstitutional plan. If you join us at jpfo.org, you'll make our voice stronger and my telephone louder. It was a spam call. I told him to go away. JPFO delivers programs designed to stem these anti-rights assaults. Our Don't Inspire Evil initiative is broadly endorsed and is convincing mass media to stop glorifying mass murderers by name and with pictures. They encourage copycats, and we're calling them out for it. Our David and Goliath Award recognizes people who stand up to bullies attacking your rights, like journalist Emily Miller and student activist Kyle Kashuv. We have a team of ambassadors and advisors like Holocaust survivor Dov Marhofer and tactical rabbi Raziel Cohen. We have other programs. You can view these on our website. And we know better than to expect fair treatment from the mass media. These were USA Today's front page photos of the anti-gun and pro-gun presidential candidates last time around. It's just hard to believe the newspaper would be so unbalanced. But let me switch to the threats on the horizon right now. Our guns and our freedoms have deadly enemies. JPFO makes these obvious. Most gun rights groups are lost in the smokescreen, and you've heard about these. Confiscations, limits, restrictions, outright bans, taxes, registration, more checks, and outright myths. Democrats have that bill in Congress right now, and if they gain power, it gives government total control over all your guns. A federal agent will decide, are you of sound mind and character to keep your guns or get new ones? Do you have any factors that suggest you create a risk to public safety? Like, who doesn't, right? Do you meet any other requirements government deems relevant? These are actual quotes from the bill. And then unelected agents will, quote, make a determination of suitability for you to keep the guns you already own or get any new ones. If you don't meet these so-called standards, no guns for you. And you'll have to pass written tests, shooting tests, all of which will be designed later, to get a mandatory federal license and annual registration. No license, no guns. Guns without the license becomes a crime. The Second Amendment goes from an uninfringed right to an option run by armed government agents. JPFO is not overstating this case, and time is running out. We track these things for you, and that could change, for better or worse, depending on the next election. Join us to get updates and support our voice. At JPFO, never again is a verb. It's easy to support us. Just go shopping. Go to our website and buy some goodies. You don't have to be Jewish to join JPFO. You just have to love liberty. I wish I could join you in person, but hey, the plague has the streets all tied up. I was there last year. I'll be there again next year. Have a great gun rights policy conference.
Hey everyone, this is Eric Pratt from Gun Owners of America, and I'm glad to share with you what GOA has been doing this year. A year that, as you know, has been like no other. I mean, can you remember another time when you could get arrested for opening your business, but not arrested for looting one? It's no wonder that gun sales are breaking records by the millions this year. Sales are off the charts, and some of the new gun owners may be watching right now, and if that's the case, I want to welcome you to the Second Amendment community. At GOA, we've been fighting to stop the spread of gun control across the country. For example, when Nancy Pelosi tried to sneak gun control into a COVID relief bill this past spring, GOA generated 1 million messages and phone calls into the Congress to stop her. But that's not all. We also took the fight to the states because governors and mayors were trying to use the pandemic to shut down gun stores and ranges. So from coast to coast, we were working to stop this. And we had very notable victories in several places: North Carolina, Maryland, Massachusetts, and Virginia. But perhaps our most comical victory was in Durham, North Carolina, where the mayor had ordered gun stores closed. We sent a legal cease and desist letter, which prompted the anti-gun mayor to immediately reverse course, but not without a big whining session. The mayor took to the local media and howled about why he had to put up the white flag. Listen to what he said. Our lawyers said we couldn't win. They said we were going to have to pay the legal fees for Gun Owners of America in Grassroots, North Carolina. And so that's why we made the decision to reopen gun stores, which is, you know, just awful. Gun stores are damaging. It's terrible to be forced into this position. I mean, you can just hear this snowflake fighting back the tears, right? But this was just one of the many great victories from all around the country where we forced anti-gun politicians to open up gun stores and ranges. We also persuaded sheriffs to resume the process of issuing concealed carry permits. In Pennsylvania, for example, GOA activists absolutely deluged their sheriffs. One even said, wow, we got a lot of blowback from residents of the county. And so guess what? He and other sheriffs started reissuing permits. In June, we helped push 4 fantastic pro-gun bills into law in Louisiana. The first 3 dealt with church carry, firearms preemption, and constitutional carry during a declared emergency. The final one prevents anti-gun politicians from banning or regulating firearms during an emergency or disaster, like the pandemic of 2020. This last one was especially exciting because it was introduced specifically because of the activism of GOA's grassroots. The sponsor of the bill heard from GOA members. He introduced the bill and we worked with him in pushing it through the legislature. Then we worked to rally the grassroots to encourage the governor to sign the bill, which he did along with the other 3 bills. So there has truly been a lot of good things happening around the country this year. And I should mention that we even helped a couple of states to reject red flag laws. Oklahoma enacted the first in the nation law to prohibit red flags. This was a GOA-backed bill, and it prevents gun confiscation orders from being used at any level of government in Oklahoma. In New Hampshire, Governor Chris Sununu listened to gun owners when he vetoed 2 red flag bills that were sent to him by the legislature. So all this is great news. Now, as far as items that are still in limbo, I know that a lot of you have been following our bump stock case, and as I record this video, we are still awaiting a decision by the U.S. Court of Appeals for the Sixth Circuit. So our efforts to block this ban are still alive. GOA also has some other cases going on. We won a historic case in Virginia by getting universal background checks struck down for young adults. In fact, you can go to our website at gunowners.org to read more about this and many other cases. But let me just end by reminding everyone how important this year's elections are. I want a commitment from everyone who's watching that you will get your pro-gun family and friends to the polls this year. I mean, do you have children who are of voting age? Make sure they're registered and vote absentee if they're away at school. Do you know any of the almost 3 million Americans who became gun owners for the first time this year? Let them know how critical this year's elections are to protecting their new firearm. Look, we are all in this together, fighting to maintain our liberties, so don't let up. We have a lot of work to do before the November elections. Thank you so much.
Hello, everyone. My name is Lara Smith, and I'm the national spokesperson for the Liberal Gun Club. Yes, you heard that right, the Liberal Gun Club. Founded in 2008, Liberal Gun Club is one of the best established left-of-center Second Amendment organizations, and our mission is to be the premier pro-Second Amendment voice for left-of-center gun owners in the national conversation on firearms. In order to achieve our mission, we encourage new participants in the shooting sports and provide firearms safety and shooting instruction programs, as well as providing a forum for civil discourse on these issues. Like most organizations, our membership is up significantly this year. Our core membership is up 24% since January 1st, and across media platforms, our membership is up similarly. We've gone up over 20% on Facebook for public Facebook following, and we've gone up 30% on other social media platforms such as YouTube and Twitter. So, who follows us? Well, our target demographic is the 25% of non-gun owners who, when asked by the Pew Research Center, stated that owning guns is essential to their sense of freedoms. And the right to own guns is essential to their sense of freedoms. Of course, we are looking to get the 50% of gun-owning Democrats who have the same beliefs regarding their freedoms when asked the same question. Many of these people are the ones who have been new buyers since the pandemic began and have become members of Liberal Gun Club. Of course, since our mission is to educate, we have 2 different prongs of our education. 1, we speak to legislatures, which I'll talk about in a minute. And 2, we have education of firearms owners and prospective firearms owners. We have 3 formal classes for which we certify instructors. We have Introduction to Range Safety, Firearms Familiarization, and Introduction to Defensive Pistol. Additionally, we just released a Make It Safe training for those brand new to firearms and for non-shooters who don't know firearms at all, in order that those people can make the most common forms of firearms safe should they need to. Additionally, through partnership with industry recognized leaders, we have 3-day instructor classes for fundamentals of concealed carry and fundamentals of home defense. We also have a certified RSO program in development and a carbine class in development. We now have certified instructors in 26 states. We have several more states in the pipeline. We've had 500 new training requests this year, and that's from people who are not members of the Liberal Gun Club. These are outside or new member requests. These are not people who have attended a training previously or who have already been members of the club. We are also approved to teach CCW certification classes in 2 states, and we have several more in the pipeline. Obviously, because of the pandemic, our education programs needed to change a little bit this year. And like many organizations, we developed online training. So far, we've done over 40 hours of online instruction on various topics in the firearms world, and these have been much broader. They've been everything from a roundtable about being a disabled shooter, to ask the women of the LGC anything, to how to reload, or a stop the bleed class. Now, our legislative side in the theme of elect freedom for this year's GRPC. One of the things LGC does, besides our outreach to legislators, we have a certified lobbyist, and we actually go and meet legislators both on a national level and on a state level. We've done outreach in Virginia, in Oregon, and in California this year, and we also do candidate surveys. We started this in the 2018 election year, and we look to endorse candidates who are strong on both the Second Amendment and other shared values of those of us who are left of center. We look to find left of leaning politicians we agree with on most issues and who can be swayed on gun rights or who are already there. That is a program we're looking forward to expanding, and we actually have politicians who reach out to us asking to take this survey. We do this at everything from the local level all the way up to national. I just want to say thank you to the Second Amendment Foundation for inviting the Liberal Gun Club to be part of this year's GRPC, and I look forward to seeing all of you in person next year.
Hello, gun lobby. Yes, there is more than one gun lobby. While the Second Amendment Foundation focuses on education and lawsuits to protect and preserve our right to keep and bear arms, Citizens Committee is the lobbying side of our effort. It encompasses both direct and grassroots lobbying. Direct lobbying, right there on Capitol Hill or in your state capitol, in the belly of the beast, if you will, is fighting the battle on a daily basis. And then there's grassroots lobbying. I was a registered lobbyist in the state of Washington for 21 years, commuting to Olympia to represent Citizens Committee and other Washington state gun groups. Lobbyists play a critical role in passing or opposing legislation. Lobbyist is frequently used as a 4-letter word, unless it's your lobbyist. We're frequently called special interests, but when half of the homes in America, more now, have a gun in them, it's truly a public interest. Not to mention, we're there to protect a fundamental, natural, and enumerated constitutional right. One more thing about direct lobbyists. Most contract lobbyists in Washington or in your state capitals, the people in the $3,000 suits, are there with their hands out, looking for taxpayer dollars to support their clients' pet programs at your expense. Gun lobbyists are generally there with their hands up, just asking that we be left alone, our rights not diminished. And we usually pay our own way on the infrequent occasions we do ask for a funded program. The voluntary Pittman-Robertson tax on guns and ammunition is a good example, supported by gun owners back in the 1930s and still with us today, supporting conservation. Direct lobbyists are the public face of the gun lobby. They're the point of the spear. But without the weight of the shaft behind the point can't penetrate. You are the weight of the shaft that pushes the point home. You are the grassroots gun lobby. Our real strength isn't in the dollars we contribute to candidates and campaigns. Our strength rests with the fact that there are more than 80 million, again more than that now, gun owners out there. The grassroots gun lobby is every American who owns a gun, and even some who don't. Grassroots lobbying is effective. Politicians feel the heat, and it's critical that each of you communicate your concerns to your elected officials. 80 years ago, American humorist Will Rogers observed, "It's not what we don't know that gets us in trouble, it's what we know that isn't so." Half or more of a lobbyist's job, both kinds of lobbyists, is education. There is an incredible amount of misinformation floating around on the gun issue, some of it simply ignorance, but much of it intentional. It is our job as gun lobbyists to set the record straight, and that means communication. Not just to politicians, it goes to your friends, your neighbors, your community too. Letters to the editor are a good example. Your elected officials need to be informed, be educated. But you say, my elected officials are anti-gun. It doesn't matter. Inform them of the true facts. Make them go on record. As we old competitive rifle shooters say, run them up and disc them. To do that, you need ammunition. In this case, information. You'll be getting some of that at the GRPC, but by no means all. That's what CC, SAF, and other gun rights organizations are all about. They explain the issues in detail, enough for you to pass on to those that you elected. But remember, education is a lifelong activity. You don't get your diploma, walk out the door, and stop learning. It's a lifelong responsibility. New issues pop up every year. Every month in Citizens Committee's monthly Point Blank Bulletin, we publish what we call a Citizen Action Project, a CAP. Typically, it looks at a single piece of legislation or a single activity and asks members to write, email, or call elected officials or take other appropriate action for that particular issue. The CAP is a suggestion, an instigator, to remind you of the need for ongoing action. While Citizens Committee primarily focuses on lobbying, SAF gets into the act too. You'll hear more today about their new program, Second Amendment First Responders, and our Gun Rights Equality Project that reaches out to all Americans to exercise their Second Amendment rights. Thank you.
Good morning. I'm Michael Dowling, the Chairman of the Council of Licensed Firearm Owners in New Zealand. I've been asked to give a quick update to the Second Amendment Foundation for their annual Gun Rights Policy Conference. The intent of this update is to cover the latest firearms control initiatives put in place in New Zealand. The most recent changes occurred quickly in 2019 and followed in 2020 as a result of a terrorist shooting in our garden city of Christchurch on the 15th of March 2019. 51 people lost their lives and a similar number were injured when a foreign national went on a premeditated shooting rampage. This has been the most significant terrorist attack on New Zealand soil since the bombing of Rainbow Warrior in 1985, where one person died. The significant loss of life and injuries put New Zealand on the world stage and made our government feel they had to act. To understand the context, our Arms Act was enacted in 1983. There have been a number of amendments through the years. However, the premise was to control who has access to firearms and the types of firearms they are allowed access to. It's generally accepted that the usual reason to own a firearm is to hunt animals. Therefore, our first category of firearms use was to enable hunting firearms and shotguns. This was our A category license and for sporting and recreation hunting. If a person wanted to enjoy target shooting with pistols or collecting restricted weapons, these required an endorsement, but the A category license had to be obtained first. New Zealand's been unique for some time. We don't have wild animals we have to protect ourselves from, and firearms crime is very low. As a percentage of population, around 1.2 people die by firearms of every 100,000. Conversely, ownership has been quite high. We were ranked 54th of 178 countries in 2007 by the Small Arms Survey. New Zealand has been recognised for a number of years as being the second most peaceful country in the Global Peace Index. We still maintain second place despite the attacks. Within days of the event, the Prime Minister indicated there would be a change to the New Zealand firearms legislation. Comments made by the government to the firearms community and the general public indicated that firearm owners were to blame for the actions of a foreign national terrorist. Legislation was rushed through at a competitive pace so our government could claim a bragging right over how quickly they pass laws relative to the Australian government after Port Arthur. The council had a meagre number of days to prepare and present submissions to the government. We expected a considered approach to counter a present danger. Instead, we got hit with the first lot of bans, overwhelming feeling that our government, media and left-wing element of society wanted us hung, drawn and quartered for being no better than terrorists purely because we had licenses to own firearms. The legislative process moved very quickly. Firearm owners felt there was no real consideration of their situation. There was already a ban in place within days to prevent the sale and transfer of semi-automatic firearms. In fact, the moratorium was not due to expire until June this year. The ban could have run for over a year and enabled Parliament to create and consider better legislation. However, a bill was introduced on the 1st of April and passed on the 10th of April. Only one member of Parliament questioning the process and voting against the first tranche. On the 13th of April, the gun buyback scheme was initiated. Over 600 collection points set up, and the confiscations ran until the 20th December 2019. The government told New Zealanders they would rid the country of semi-automatic assault rifles. However, the legislation went further than semi-automatics, going after shotguns with a capacity more than 5 rounds, lever, pump and bolt action firearms where the magazine exceeded 10 rounds. The government collected some 56,000 firearms of an estimated pool of 240,000. As far as making our society safer, we feel it fell well short. Those that handed in potentially represents 25% of the firearms we believe are in circulation. This means around 75% of mostly prohibited firearms are now potentially held in the grey market. Instead of encouraging the appropriate compensation, we were threatened with jail or fines of $10,000 for non-compliance. It's not an ideal outcome for New Zealand Society of Firearm Owners. We will pay for this for generations to come, as we will be blamed in the future by media and government for the government's mismanagement and incompetence. An order of council was submitted in 2019 that banned certain types of military ammunition, such as tracer, armour-piercing, flechette. This legislation was signed off by the Governor-General. It did not offer any compensation to those who legally purchased ammunition. The order was rushed and contained errors that potentially would have seen shotgun ammunition banned. Luckily, we noticed it and it was fixed. At the end of 2019, a second bill was tabled. It was referred to as a continuation to address issues created in drafting the previous legislation. However, it went much further. It includes controls on ranges, clubs, redefining pistols, license terms, pistol carbines, the loss of right to remain silent, of doctor and patient privilege. It introduces powers that enable the administration agency to significantly change parts of the Act, through orders in council, well outside of the scope offered in regard to a terrorist act. Further, a Royal Commission of Inquiry was made underway to discover the failings of the system that allowed a foreign national to enter New Zealand and obtain a firearms licence without having to go through the usual checks a New Zealand citizen would have to undertake. As of this date, that report has not come back. Although a number of pieces of legislation have been introduced, the report has not identified what was failing. The Council sought legal guidance. Like most Commonwealth countries, we lack a constitution. Parliament has the sovereign right to enact law. The strongest case we had was to fight the government to ask for a judicial review of Parliament's right to confiscate ammunition without compensation. While we lost this case due to the fact that the legal system has no ability to overturn Parliament's decision, the judge agreed the decision was contrary to common law principles. We are presently going through an appeals process. We're a country of 5 million. 250,000 of us are licensed firearm owners. The council and board are made up of volunteer organisations. We doubled the number of organisations we represent to the 12 largest shooting disciplines. We increased the number of members we have 100-fold. We have an estimated membership of somewhere between 40 and 60,000 now. We needed our community to come together quickly, and they did. Our fundraising was extensive and managed to build a fighting fund in time. We have no control over the timing and knee-jerk reactions of quick-fire legislation. However, we have an election due on October the 17th, and one of our team is now running for Parliament. The second tranche of legislation is poorly drafted. It needs to be repealed, and we'll do our hardest to see that it is. Thank you for your time.
Welcome, ladies and gentlemen. Me is Frank Göpper. I'm the general manager of the FWR, Forum Waffenrecht, the biggest gun advocacy group in Germany and whole Europe. I'm a lawyer and still officer in Army Reserve as a lieutenant colonel. I was asked by the Second Amendment Foundation to give you a short overview over the gun control situation in Germany. So I will start with a general overview. Firearms are available in Germany for civil use, but you need a good reason, necessity. The accepted and most popular good reasons are target shooting, hunting, and collecting. The firearms are nearly all under license. The only exemptions which are license-free are air pressures until an expelling energy of 7.5 joule, or antiques, which means obsolete and outdated ignition systems like flintlocks and needle-fired rifles, and the design of the model must be before 1st January of 1871. All other firearms are under license. We have no special models which are banned, like RR platforms or AK platforms. They are all available. Banned are full automatic systems and military stuff like machine guns, grenade launchers, and so on. They are under the Weapon of War Control Act and not available for civil users. But semi-auto, centerfire, rimfire, signal shots, break barrels, repeating rifles, they are all available and used by hunters, target shooters, and collectors. We have the conditions to get a license. You have to be background checked, and you have to be at minimum 18 years of age. If you apply as a target shooter for a centerfire rifle or centerfire pistol, you have to be 25, or you have to show a psychologically test. which approves that you are able to possess a firearm. In the last, we have a register, a computerized register, where all licenses and all firearms are stored. The numbers of these register is we have nearly 1 million license holders and 5.5 million firearms in Germany. The gun crime rate in Germany is very moderate. And the firearms which are involved in crime are to 99%, more than 99% illegally held. The legally held firearms are nearly neglectable in the statistics, in the crime statistics. In the last years, we had to deal with the novelization of the European Union's Firearms Directive, which starts with terroristic attacks in Paris and Brussels. And they brought us a ban of so-called high-capacity magazines. So now in Germany, magazines which can hold more than 10 rounds for long guns or 20 rounds for long guns are banned. We have some other discussions in this process about deactivated firearms and acoustic salute weapons and something like that, which were very hard to deal with because we started at the point to prevent terrorists from getting arms for their terroristic attacks. And then after that, we talk about salute weapons and deactivated weapons. So let me come to an end. The positive things of these discussions are that we could release sound moderators and infrared and thermovision systems for hunters. So I wish you very good discussions on your conference, and I wish you a lot of success. Stick together, hold on, and keep strong for your rights. Straight, shoot straight. Bye from Germany.
Hello there, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Tony Bernardo. I'm the Executive Director of the Canadian Shooting Sports Association up there in the cold country of Canada. I've been asked to do a 5-minute video for you on the situation of gun control in Canada. So let me start right away by telling you a little bit about our existing gun control system. First of all, Canada has had licensing of firearms owners for a number of years. In order to acquire and possess a firearm, you need to have a government license that includes background checks. The only positive thing I can say about this is that it eliminates the waiting period when you go to buy a brand new firearm, because if you have an active license, the waiting period no longer exists. However, that said, our licensing and registration systems run at the speed of smell, and they're administered by the Royal Canadian Mounted Police. Our licensing may eliminate waiting periods for purchases, but it might take weeks or months for the system to turn out a registration. Firearms are broken down into 3 categories here. First category is non-restricted. That means mostly long guns, okay? These guns are not registered because we successfully beat the long gun registry several years back. So, in any of these long guns, standard hunting rifles and shotguns, they're not registered within Canada. Then we have a category called restricted. Restricted are handguns, short-barreled center-fire semi-auto long guns, and a few other different types. They are registered firearms. Their category is restricted. They can only be discharged on a licensed shooting range. And then we have the third category, the most confusing of all, which is prohibited. Because we have prohibited firearms, we have prohibited firearms, and we have prohibited firearms, and all 3 of them are different. Some of the prohibited firearms are totally prohibited. You could not possess them in any way, shape, or form. Some prohibited firearms are grandfathered in from people who owned them previous. And with those prohibited firearms, you can own them, but you can't do anything with them. You're not even allowed to take them to the shooting range. And then we have some prohibited firearms which have complete grandfathering, and you can shoot them and you can do all those other things, but there's no importation allowed into Canada of any new types of prohibited firearms, nor can you newly register a prohibited firearm. Our current situation now, on May 1st, 2020, our government added 1,500 makes and models of firearms to the prohibited lists. Most of these firearms are what we would term black rifles, but there's a bunch of shotguns and other things like that on them, and some that really should never have even been on this list. Well, none of them should be on the list, but you understand my point. The guns include the AR-15 family of rifles, the Ruger Mini 14 family of rifles, the VZ-58 family of rifles, the M14 family of rifles, the Beretta CX4 carbine, the Robinson Arms XCR rifle, the Sig Sauer MCX and MPX firearms, the Swiss Arms Classic Greens and the Season series of rifles, all firearms with a bore of 20 millimeters or larger, and all firearms capable of discharging a projectile with an energy of over 10,000 joules. That's 7,375 foot-pounds. These last two are very important, as they seem to have far-reaching impacts upon Canadian firearms owners as well as visitors to Canada. All firearms with a bore of 20 millimeters or larger. Let's start with that. The bore is defined as the section of barrel the projectile travels through, usually defined as being measured from the end of the chamber to the muzzle with all devices removed. In other words, a flash hider must be removed before a barrel length can be measured. Makes sense. By that same standard, a removable choke tube must be removed as well. Remember, the bore is the part of the barrel that the projectile passes through. The removable choke is simply another gun part. This means that almost every 12 and 10 gauge shotgun in Canada, literally millions of them, are now prohibited weapons, because with the choke tubes removed, the area at the muzzle measures greater than 20 millimeters. When we confronted our public safety minister about this, he said, well, that's not what they intended. And he later clarified the government's position by putting out a tweet. That's right, a tweet to say that 12 and 10 gauge shotguns are not banned in Canada. As well, the RCMP changed their measurement standards in a single morning and decided that they would measure shotguns differently than they measure every other type of firearm. They did this on the fly. And remember, of course, being policy, not law, they can do it on fly in the other direction too. Despite the clarity of the sentence, all firearms with a bore of 20 millimeters or larger. The minister has refused to add two simple words, except shotguns. Well, you know, if you've been in this political fight a long time, and I know many of you have, you understand that if the government refuses to make such a simple change, it's because they intended it to be there. They intended that at some point in time, they will use this against us. The next segment there is called all firearms capable of discharging a projectile with an energy greater than 10,000 joules. That's 7,375 foot-pounds of energy. Presumably intended to ban long-range target rifles like the 50 BMG and other high-energy rounds. It inadvertently captured many very expensive big game rifles like the 460 Weatherby and many others. And as always, of course, the devil is in the details, and the RCMP lawyers are nothing if not clever, and maybe diabolical. because the sentence reads, all firearms capable of discharging a projectile. The word capable of has a very, very specific meaning in Canadian law. In 1993, the Supreme Court of Canada ruled that the words capable of include an aspect of potential capability. Capable of is a word without qualifiers, without conditions. It simply means capable of. The court decision did not say capable of doing it safely. It did not say capable of doing it twice. It just says capable of. Many bolt-action rifles and some single-shot firearms have been captured and prohibited by this new law. But in fact, most centerfire bolt-action rifles are capable of producing this high level of energy. Just capable. Doubt this? Take most centerfire bolt actions. Remove the barrel, which of course is just a part. Screw on a new barrel with a 460 Weatherby cartridge in it. Remove the bolt out of the bolt race. Push one cartridge up the bolt race and put the bolt back in. Pull the trigger. The gun will go kaboom. It may wreck the gun. It probably will wreck a lot of guns. But it doesn't matter because the promise has now been fulfilled. The firearm is capable of discharging a projectile with 10,000 joules of energy or more. Several court actions have been launched against the federal government. But given that the government's actions are within their legal authorities, and that Canada has no constitutional protections regarding firearms, these have a limited chance of success. In our opinion, the real means to change this situation is political. The Conservative Party of Canada has pledged to reverse these draconian restrictions on Canada's firearms owners, and it appears at this time that we're racing towards an early election. A changing government will fix this issue. Until then, keep us in your thoughts. Have a great gun rights policy conference and never, never let up on the fight. Thanks for your time.
My name is David Scallon. I'm Secretary General of FACE, which is the European Federation for Hunting and Conservation. We represent Europe's 7 million hunters, and our members are Europe's national hunting associations in 37 countries. We deal with all issues affecting hunting and conservation at the EU and the international level. I'm delighted to speak to you today and to be part of this international panel. I'm going to give you an overview of the recent proposals at EU level to restrict lead in ammunition. First over lead shot over wetlands, but also I'm going to talk to you about a proposal for a wider restriction on all lead in all ammunition. We've had a lot of engagement at the international level, including within IUCN, the International Union for Conservation of Nature, and on the Convention of Migratory Species, and the end product in their decision making on lead and ammunition has really been either wetlands focused positions or giving countries the choice whether they want to regulate lead in ammunition or not. At the EU level, we have a very interesting process that's kicked off about 5 years ago. It started with a request to regulate EU-wide the use of lead shot for hunting over wetlands. And this wasn't a major issue at the time for Europe's hunting associations, mainly because 23 of the 27 EU member states have already phased out lead shot for hunting over wetlands. What we saw in a very intensive decision-making and opinion-making process was that we found ourselves in a very tricky position with how risk was approached and with how key definitions were decided. And in summary, we have a very problematic restriction on lead shot over wetlands that was agreed recently by EU member states in a decision-making committee. And this is all part of the REACH regulation, which is a very complex piece of chemicals regulation. And it's not an ideal regulation at all to be working with lead in ammunition because of how its decision-making works. The end product, but we still have some scope to change this, is a restriction on lead shot over wetlands that's much, much broader than lead shot over wetlands. It includes huge amounts of land with no visible water. There is a ban on hunters being able to possess lead shot, which we have a firm opinion that that is illegal and outside the scope of the regulation. And there's also the inclusion of buffer zones around all or any water. And the problem here is that the proposed definition from a legal perspective includes all water regardless of size. So even a small puddle in a field after a shower of rain constitutes a wetland for the purpose of this regulation. So we have a major problem now to try to deal with in the European Parliament. But this is relatively small scale compared to what we are likely to see in October, because the European Commission also asked its main agency on chemicals, the European Chemicals Agency, to prepare a total restriction on all lead in all ammunition. And we see this proposal going one direction. When it's published, we expect a very broad ban on the use of all lead in all ammunition for hunting and target shooting. And this is going to be a huge program of work for us over the next couple of years to try to assess whether this can be proportionate or not with regards to risk. So there is a risk to water birds and wetlands, but the risk outside of wetlands is very different, and in many cases it's low. The approach of the agency to human health will be very interesting. We expect they will brand lead as a non-threshold substance with no safe limit. So we are curious to see whether they will accept any lead in game meat, even though we can manage this through careful butchering, and that's the advice of several national food safety agencies in the EU. So in summary, and you can see some links can be shared about our position on this work on lead shot over wetlands, but we're in for a very, very challenging road ahead with regards to the future of lead and ammunition at the EU level. And our members will have a lot of concerns about the EU's approach to this, in particular with respect to risk, in particular also with respect to proportionality. So we will be engaging, of course, with our colleagues in WFSA, the World Forum on Shooting Activities, and with our colleagues in the wider sector. And we've been quite good so far at keeping ourselves up to speed on what's happening. We hope you enjoyed this short overview, and I look forward to seeing some of you in the future in person, hopefully. Thank you very much.
Hey GRPC, this is Charlie from Riding Shotgun with Charlie. I am here in the Stagecoach, which is what I call my car. It's the mobile Riding Shotgun with Charlie Studios. And I'm making a video for you to show you how easy it is to make videos on your phone. You know, the cool thing about making videos is you can make them from anywhere. From Nashville, Tennessee, Birmingham, Alabama, from Kennesaw, Georgia, from Atlanta. In the last 5 months, 6 months, since the virus, who shall not be named, has happened, everybody's kind of become a TV star. And And I don't mean TV stars in that we make $100,000 for a 22-minute sitcom. I mean a TV star that we all have to be in videos. With Zoom lessons and Google Meet, this is what we have been working on and surviving on so that we can communicate with each other. I want to talk about how easy it is to make videos on your phone. I'm making it all with my cell phone. The great thing about the phone is you have it with you all the time. Using our phones is super handy and it's easy to edit. You've got all kinds of video capabilities. I started with an iPhone 4S and now I only have an iPhone 7. Just take some time with your phone, take some time with your app. The one that I use on my iPhone is iMovie. I've been doing it since 2015. And the videos I've been made on my phone have been watched 20 million times all around the world. It's something that's super easy that everybody can do, and it's very important that if we are going to increase our numbers of gun owners, that we all know how to operate these tools and we all utilize these tools. As people are scrolling through their social media, they're more likely to watch a video than they are to sit down and read an article. I know that's true for me. I get to see something, I get to hear something, and that tickles more of my senses. There's editing software that usually comes with a phone, and you can do this virtually anywhere. You'll have a video studio everywhere you go. I think everybody needs to be doing this in the gun community so we can show our new gun friends and show the people that are new to the gun community that we aren't all that the anti-gun crowd makes us out to be. We're all friendly, we're all easy to get along with, and we would probably let someone shoot a magazine or two worth of ammunition if they just asked us. It's important that we take this message and get our message out as people who are in the firearm community, in the gun community, the 2A community, whatever, gun rights, whatever you want to call it. We're here and we need to get these videos out. We need to make videos look good. We need to make them look decent and presentable. You can do all sorts of really cool stuff with the video from your phone. And you can take the audio away so you can put up pictures. You can slow the video down. Slow the video down. I can speed the video up. You can add titles. You can do all sorts of really cool things. And I can take the audio from somewhere else and import it into the software. If there's something that we want to promote, it should be very easy for us to be able to make videos and to put them on our social media, whether it's YouTube or Instagram or Facebook, right from your phone. You can put in some still pictures like this one, or you can maybe get rid of the sound of cars. I don't know, possibly. That would be really cool if you could do that. All the videos that I'm doing today, I've made on my phone. I've edited on my phone. So to sum up, videos are simple to make. We can do them on our phones. We can make them just about everywhere. Our phones have the video editing software, and we can put these on all of our social media platforms. Keep putting some videos out, learn how to work some videos, and rock and roll, baby. I thank you for watching this video. Thanks to the Second Amendment Foundation for having the GRPC, for making everyone learn how to do some videos. And I look forward to seeing all the videos that you're creating this year from your phone. We'll see you next year. Thanks a lot.
Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the Gun Rights Policy Conference and our session on using new media to advance gun rights. I, along with my fellow panelists, wish that we could all be together in person in Orlando, but events have come together to conspire against us, and this is what we're going to be doing here remotely, but technology is wonderful and it's bringing us together, and it cannot stop this wonderful conference from taking place, no matter how much the anti-gun lobby would like to see us just wither away and die, right? All right, so let's talk about using new media. As you know, if you've been watching this or been attending the conference for a number of years, as we've talked about this topic, things tend to kind of morph. They move back and they move forward. Technology comes along and creates new opportunities. Sometimes things that were not quite in vogue a couple of years ago comes right back again. But let's go over some of these things, okay? Most of you I know are using Facebook probably. whether or not it's to get news, whether or not it's just to post news, whether or not it is to share pictures and other things with friends and relatives. But Facebook is a very powerful tool, and one that should be a part of everyone's arsenal in using to try to advance gun rights, because you can create a group, create a page, and create that to discuss the issues on guns and why it is safe and why it is proper to own firearms, right? It takes a little bit of time sometimes to build up an audience for this, but you're going to be perfectly fine. In time, it will work. In time, you can have potential influence, right? Okay, what about Twitter? Twitter is a very powerful tool. Twitter is also, in my opinion, something that is a bit of a rabbit hole in some ways. Can be a toxic stew for a lot of us. You can easily get into Twitter battles, Twitter wars with people that you do not know, and you can go right down the drain with that. You need to be careful when you're using Twitter. Twitter, one of the great advantages of Twitter is because of its real, true, instantaneous nature. While Facebook also, you post and it's live. When you go on Twitter, because of the way the nature of that program works, that platform works, is that your tweet will be seen by lots of people and will be shared by lots of people, depending upon what you're saying, right? Every average day tweet about your life is not going to really go that far. But if you're going to throw out things on firearms, guns, gun sales, whatever you want, the politics of guns, those types of things, you will get, some extra mileage out of that as people share, respond, and whatever. My warning to you in using Twitter is to be very careful when you use Twitter in terms of engaging with those you do not know, which is probably going to be the vast majority of people out there, and watch out how you conduct yourself, because it is, once again, it is very easy to get into a Twitter war that you're going to find yourself in kind of a morass that you don't really want to get into. Stay above the fray, whether or not it's Facebook or Twitter, stay above the fray, be reasonable, be authoritative, be informed, just give them the facts. One of the things I've always said for years and years is that one of the great advantages that we have as conservatives, as firearm owners, as firearm proponents, gun proponents, is that we are armed with the facts, right? We have the facts. The other side has nothing but a lot of conjecture, hyperbole, and a lot of false statements that they will tend to make over time as they try to shape the narrative on guns. YouTube, I think, when it comes to things that you're doing, and I'll just say this with Facebook, and even I guess on Twitter too, is that never forget the video component of these platforms. Facebook allows you to post live videos. I would do it. If you've got to, set up your own show, do it. Or just go ahead and do a 5-minute little broadcast, go live and talk to your heart's content about why you're a proud gun owner or why this or that, relating to guns. You'll be just fine with that. That'll work very, very well. YouTube, you can do the same thing. You can go live on YouTube, or you can just record and then upload, edit, and then do that all later on. Parler has come into the conversation. Parler is fine, but it is the echo chamber, right? You're going to preach to the choir. The idea here when you're using social media is to not preach to the choir, but it is to preach to those that don't know any better, right? And to spread the word about guns and the good side of guns, right? So that's what you need to do. Now, podcasts, thanks to COVID-19, have exploded. We have some great people around here, the Polite Society podcast, Riding Shotgun with Charlie, and you can go on and on and on. Fantastic podcast. Now is the hour. Now is the time. And podcasts don't have to be the audio recording version, right? You can do the video too. You can do video and audio. There's many opportunities to do this. Spotify offers basically an app, Anchor, that they bought that allows you to do a podcast off your phone, record it, edit it, and then post it up. And you can get it onto Spotify and Apple Podcasts and those types of things very easily, very readily. So I encourage you to do something like that. You can use Instagram for pictures. Pictures, they say pictures are worth 1,000 words. Definitely. People love that. Okay. So use all of these resources as much as you can. You will be able to advance gun rights like you never thought you could before as a result of this. And then finally, What are we using today? All right. Zoom, Microsoft Teams, Google Hangouts. Fabulous, fabulous way. A new opportunity, something that was out there, but we really weren't taking advantage of in the, I'll say the leisure side of the business kind of a thing here. Businesses were using a lot of these services to conduct meetings, but a lot of us were not doing that. Now this has become part and parcel of our lives, whether or not it's a work meeting or a family meeting. But use it. You can create a great following, and you can create great meetings and events using these platforms. So I encourage you to do that at all opportunities. Once again, thank you for joining me today. I'm hoping you have a great conference. Enjoy the other panelists and the other sessions. And above all else, stay safe, stay well. God bless America. And I'll see you at the next Gun Rights Policy Conference in 2021.
Hi, my name is Paul Lathrop from the Polite Society podcast. The theme of this year's Gun Rights Policy Conference is electing freedom. In my opinion, even though we say every presidential election that this year is the most important election in our lifetime, this year it just might be. With such a critical election in the balance, I want to talk to everyone who's in Second Amendment media and those who are considering starting a blog or podcast or a video channel. Those of us in the Second Amendment media have a huge responsibility. With distrust of mainstream media reaching an all-time high, increasingly, the general public is reaching out to alternative media sources to get information and news. Now, that's both a blessing and a curse. Most of us are not professional journalists. We're average people. We generally try to do our best to inform, influence, and entertain our audience. What many of us also do, however, is let our egos get in the way and wind up hurting the cause more than we help. Let me give you an example. Let's say media member X does a piece on how the crossed thumb grip is a superior two-handed firing grip to the thumbs forward grip. X puts together a well-thought-out piece, and it hits well in the public. Sure enough, media member Y is going to think that's not correct. Y then goes to their audience and says not only that X is wrong, but that their audience should never listen to an idiot like X. And by the way, X voted for Hillary and Obama. Now, I used an example of a training issue here, but it could just as easily extend to a political or other type of opinion. Theoretically, we're all on the same side. We all want to save and expand our Second Amendment rights. However, when we get into a, let's call it a spitting match with a member of the media, we turn off a large portion of our audience. Let me put it to you as a consumer of media. Before I got into podcasting and video production, I was a big consumer of podcasts. Several years ago, I followed a podcast and faithfully listened to it every week, within a few hours of when it was released. I also followed a blog that I had a lot of respect for, and I had updates to its website pushed to my Google News page, and I checked that daily. Now, one day, the two of them had a disagreement, and looking back, I honestly don't remember what the disagreement was about. But exactly what I described a few seconds ago happened. There was a social media exchange of epic proportions, and after reading some of it, I didn't even read it all. I felt like I needed to take a shower to rinse off all the vileness. What did I do? I stopped following both of them. I nearly stopped following Second Amendment media altogether. That's the danger that we face. We have the ability to attract others to our cause, but we also have the ability to repel those that it might at least be sympathetic to our cause. So here's what I ask of you. If you're in the Second Amendment media, please, if you disagree with something you hear or read or see, feel free to disagree in a respectful manner publicly. However, do not attack on a personal level. Let's be frank. When a personal attack happens, it's because the person making the attack has basically lost the debate and is using a last-ditch effort to undermine the credibility of the other person. If you don't like a cross thumbs grip, cool. Tell why the thumbs forward grip is better. Don't like a proposed change in regulation? Cool. Tell why that's not a good idea. Don't like a particular candidate someone is pushing? Cool. Tell why a different candidate is better. What you don't want to do is get halfway into a 12-pack or maybe a fifth of Kentucky's finest and then take to the media and blast away. You see, if you are in the media, everything you do is in the public square, and your actions are scrutinized. There's no such thing as a private spat. I'll tell you right now, there are people who you will see on video this weekend I don't get along very well with. However, only one person, and that's my wife, Susan, knows who those people are. They don't even know. I work very hard to be able to work with anyone and help them help us expand our rights. Thank you to the good people at the Second Amendment Foundation and the Citizens Committee for the right to keep and bear arms for asking me to speak. And thank you for your time today.
Hello, my name is John Richardson, and I blog at No Lawyers, Only Guns and Money. I'm also the co-host of the Polite Society podcast, and with that, let me begin. These are the times that try men's souls. The summer soldier and the sunshine patriot will, in this crisis, shrink from the service of their country. But he that stands it now deserves the love and thanks of men and women. Tyranny, like hell, is not easily conquered. Yet we have this consolation with us, that the harder the conflict, the more glorious the triumph. What we obtain too cheap, we esteem too lightly. It is dearness only that gives everything its value. Heaven knows how to put a proper price upon its goods, and it would be strange indeed if so celestial an article as freedom should not be highly rated. That was the introduction to Thomas Paine's The American Crisis, published in December 1776. I started with this quote from Paine because of a comment by commentator Mark Levin. He said that bloggers are pamphleteers in the tradition of Thomas Paine. I never thought of those terms before, but he is absolutely correct. Bloggers are the modern-day equivalent of pamphleteers. That is especially true when it comes to the Second Amendment, gun rights, freedom, and the advancement of these ideals. Just like Thomas Paine and his fellow pamphleteers, we have a bias for liberty and a bias for limited government. We present ideas that challenge the groupthink of the mainstream media. Ideas like taking responsibility for your own safety and for that of your family. Anyone who has recently been in a gun store or tried to buy ammunition knows that guns have flown off the shelves and that ammunition is in short supply, even with manufacturers working 24/7. 8 of the 10 highest weeks for NICS checks have been in this year, 2020. Unlike in some past surges, this is not existing buyers trying to get something before it is possibly banned. No, this is different, and that is what makes it so important. The surge has brought about almost 5 million new gun owners, people who have never owned a gun, people who never thought they needed to own a gun, people who have stared reality in the face and said, I need to protect those that I love. 40% of these new gun buyers are women, and many are minorities. They have seen firsthand the lies of the media and the gun ban industry. They found out that it is not easier to buy a gun than Sudafed or a puppy or any of the other myths. They found out about waiting periods and FBI background checks and having to show identification. They have found out, most importantly, that they have been lied to by the gun banners and the media. And this is our opportunity. We must bring these new gun owners into our fold. These people are our dike against a flood of new gun control laws. We must use our blogs to point out the fallacy of gun laws. We must use our podcasts to critically discuss defensive gun uses. We must use our YouTube and Full 30 videos to educate new gun owners on safe gun handling. This is an opportunity, and we need to be smart about it. We need to remember that we were all new once. We have all used the wrong terms at least once in our lives. So when someone calls a magazine a clip, where they post a picture on Facebook or Instagram of their new handgun with a, shall we say, less than ideal holster. Don't be snarky. Reach out to them. Offer to help. Share your knowledge. Educate them, but in a nice way. One last thing. I don't care about the color of your skin, your sexual orientation, whether you're liberal or conservative, pro-choice or pro-life. If you are a gun owner and support gun rights, you are my friend. That is all that matters, and that is the message we need to promote. Thank you for listening today.
Amalan tells me I'm the most read gun writer on the internet. I hope it's true. We are in an information war to save the Republic. We've been fighting the most powerful information dissemination empire ever known to man, what many call the mainstream media, or the old media. It consists of those media organs which used to control the narrative in the United States and much of the world. Its leaders governed the Associated Press, the New York Times, the Washington Post, the LA Times, the BBC. We must use new media to get our message out. Some of the new media is old, but which found a way to be put to productive new uses like talk radio. The internet has been here for roughly 30 years, but it's still expanding and is counted as profoundly new and different from the media that came before. It's hard to separate out new social media like Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, podcast, and even texting from the technological development in digital communication, cell phones, and the internet. We're winning with unequal media. We win because our ideas are a closer approximation of reality than our opponents. Our opponents rely on emotional arguments based on falsehoods. We win with facts or emotion. Use both of them. There are 5 things you can do with new media. You don't have to do everything at once to be effective. Do what you find you like and enjoy. That way you'll do more of it. First, research. It's easier to research things than ever before. Take time to research the claims of our enemies and to understand our arguments as well as theirs. Read Amalan. I write on there a lot. Read the journals that are put out by the Second Amendment Foundation. Be skeptical. Go to original sources. Remember, part of what you want to do is discredit the old media, attack their false premises, create skeptics. A skeptic is 3/4 on the way to being one of our supporters. After doing research, record a video sound recorder or a digital audio recorder or a digital camera or a cell phone is just as important to defending freedom today as a firearm. Then report what you've recorded. Post it on YouTube, LiveLink, BitChute. Keep a copy, of course. Send it to others. Use alternate sources. Complain of censorship. Don't forget the talk show network. Call into talk shows. Very few people do. Maybe 1% to 2% ever even attempt it. Remember, what you want to do on a talk show is get your idea out. The host's idea is to have you make him look good. So get your idea out very quickly in the first couple of sentences. If they try to cut you off, you'll already have your most important point out. Finally, comment and discuss. We are making tremendous progress in comments. So much so that the opposition doesn't like to allow comments on many of their sources anymore. So make comments, sign if you have to, have a couple of email addresses you can use. Do not make personal attacks. Go on the online journals and the outlets where people discuss gun issues. It doesn't matter if they're our own people. We need to educate others as well. So what you want to do is research so you're informed, and you can do that on new media better than anywhere else. Report what you found, call into radio shows, and comment and discuss what's going on. Have fun doing it. You don't have to do everything at once. When they start calling you names, you have won. You've won the argument. The facts, the Constitution, and the culture are all on our side. We can win this battle, but we won't win if we don't fight.
Ever since Kenosha, the anti-gun left has been freaking out about the prospect of individuals who are armed and defending themselves, their property, their businesses, their livelihoods, and their families. Professor Darrell Miller of the Duke Center for Firearms Law took to the Washington Post recently to wring his hands and blame all of this on gun politics, permissive gun laws, as if guns are underregulated in this country, and social media, which allows individuals to communicate with each other and coordinate these defense efforts. He, of course, says that tolerance for heavily armed, self-appointed peacekeepers in our public square is not required by the Second Amendment. His prescription? Put your faith in the police. As he says, trust law enforcement professionals who are accountable to the people rather than private groups who are accountable to no one. The good professor probably knows very well that police officers frequently are less accountable than the average individual is, thanks to qualified immunity. Now, with the added insanity of the defund the police movement, we've got reduced police forces, and we've got mayors who are holding back police departments, giving protesters and rioters room to destroy, because somehow that upholds the First Amendment. What the Second Amendment does protect is the right of the people to keep and bear arms. That includes the right, when police won't do it, to protect themselves, protect their livelihoods, their businesses, and their families. That is what the Second Amendment protects, and that's what the American people will increasingly do unless and until the defund the police movement is reversed and police find it within themselves to begin defending citizens and upholding laws once again.
Hello, my name is Dr. John Edine. I am a pediatric orthopedic surgeon out of San Antonio, Texas. I am also the membership director of Doctors for Responsible Gun Ownership. In previous GRPCs, I have spoken about active killers and hospitals and the terrorist threat against hospitals. In The Unthinkable, an active shooter in a hospital, I discussed the 5 stages that an active killer goes through before an attack. We also discussed the stopwatch of death, the fact that time is the key element in preventing the death of innocents. If the response comes from inside the building, there are only 2 or 3 killed. If the response comes from outside, the death toll rises to 12 to 15. Most hospitals are gun-free zones and thus fall into the second category. Many in the hospital cannot run, hide, or fight because they are incapacitated. It is immoral to keep those who are not inclined to do harm in a disarmed state, making everyone in the hospital an easy target. In the crosshairs, are hospitals targets for terrorist attack? I described the history and rationale behind terrorism against hospitals. The International Institute for Counterterrorism did a paper titled Terrorist Attacks Against Hospitals. They found nearly 100 attacks against hospitals in 43 countries with approximately 775 people killed between 1981 and 2013. There were 1,217 wounded in these attacks. There have been several major attacks against medical facilities since 2013. On December 5, 2013, Al-Qaeda of the Arabian Peninsula attacked the Defense Ministry Hospital in Sana'a, Yemen. The Al-Oradi Hospital was attacked using a suicide car bomb, guns, and grenades. Overall, 56 were killed and 200 plus injured. On February 23, 2014, a suicide car bomb was detonated outside of a field hospital in Atme, Syria, near the border with Turkey. There were 14 killed and 70 wounded. The next major hospital attack happened on March 8, 2017 at the Sardar Mohammed Daud Khan Military Hospital in the secure area of Kabul, Afghanistan. A suicide bomber blew himself up at the back gate, allowing 3 to 4 terrorists dressed as doctors to gain entrance to the hospital. Later, it was found that 2 interns were insiders and participated in the carnage. The killers were systematic in their murdering, throwing grenades into the wards and then shooting survivors in the head. The attackers had 7 hours to do their killing before Afghan security and special forces were able to take back the hospital. Over 100 were killed. The International Committee of the Red Cross reported 240 attacks in 2014 through 2015 that killed or injured medical personnel and closed, damaged, or destroyed medical facilities in Afghanistan. The United Nations Assistance Mission in Afghanistan documented 119 incidents where healthcare facilities were targeted in 2016. Although it was not a successful attack on a hospital, on January 27, 2018, a Taliban suicide bomber drove an explosive-laden ambulance past one checkpoint, stating that he was taking a patient to the Jamhuriyat Hospital. He was stopped at a second checkpoint in a crowded shopping district near the hospital when he detonated the bomb. The death toll was initially reported at 103, with 235 wounded. On May 12, 2020, 3 men dressed as police entered the Dasht-e-Barchi hospital run by Doctors Without Borders and opened fire in the maternity ward, killing at least 24 people, including newborns. Afghan security forces entered the hospital grounds, and a gun battle lasting 4 hours resulted in the deaths of the terrorists. The U.S. blamed the group ISIS-K. In the United States, on March 24, 2020, a man who was planning to bomb a hospital in Belton, Missouri, shot himself after being shot by FBI agents who were trying to arrest him. It was determined that the attack was motivated by the government's response to the coronavirus pandemic and by racial, religious, and anti-government animus. Since the coronavirus pandemic has hit the U.S., people are no longer gathering in large groups. There are no sporting events, no theater productions, schools are closed, and for the most part, streets are empty. Terrorists are looking for places with large numbers of potential victims. Hospitals are still open and have large populations because of the viral crisis. They make tempting targets for those looking to make a political statement. With the recent outbreak of anarchist violence and rioting by Antifa and Black Lives Matter in large Democrat-controlled cities, hospitals may become convenient points of attack. Even Ronald McDonald houses are not safe. On August 10, 2020, rioters smashed windows and attempted to enter the building where 30 families, many with sick children, cowered in fear in downtown Chicago. Fortunately, nobody was injured. With the presidential election coming in November, we may not have seen the end of the anarchist terrorism. We must realize that hospital terrorism may be coming to your town. Be ready.
Greetings to everybody at this Second Amendment Foundation Gun Rights Policy Conference. I want to thank all of the members of the Second Amendment Foundation that have made this possible, and in particular to thank my colleagues at the Doctors for Responsible Gun Ownership for allowing me to share their time with them in presenting to you today. I'm Dr. Dennis Petruccelli. I am a forensic psychiatrist, and I have studied human violence and aggression and the evaluation of human violence for the past 20 years. Today I want to focus on red flag laws, and in particular, I'd like to make the point that the due process deficiencies of red flag laws are very likely the least problematic parts of them. And that's because these laws lack fundamental fairness. And the reason for that is that we don't have any form of risk assessment that could possibly accomplish what red flag laws challenge us to do, which is to identify persons who are at great imminent risk of violence with a gun, absent illegal behavior leading up to that risk assessment. So first, let me emphasize that those of us who do this kind of work, the exception of those of us at Doctors for Responsible Gun Ownership, are extremely biased against gun owners. In gun violence, psychiatry, risk assessment, and social policy, Dr. Eliza Gold, a forensic psychiatrist, wrote, "The cumulative implication of this evidence is that the prevalence of guns is a high risk factor for gun violence, and restricting access to firearms decreases firearms-related morbidity and mortality," essentially saying that the presence of a gun is sufficient for there to be risk. And given that that will be the mindset of most evaluators, I don't see how evaluees could possibly get a fair shake.
Continuing along the line of bias, it should be noted that most systems of risk assessment inadequately document those factors about people that mitigate risk. So forensic psychiatrists are very good at coming up with lists of aspects of a person's past or current behavior or thinking that predisposes them to violence. We're much less able to identify those factors that mitigate that risk. And therefore, when an assessment is done, it's very, very difficult for the evaluee to possibly come out looking not at risk. If we consider then the assessment tools that we have, what we find is that they are entirely lacking given the challenges posed to them. In Hilliard and Heinz's review of the Virginia Beach shooting, where a former employee entered an area of employment that was gun-free for employees only and killed 12 former colleagues, their review showed that even if Virginia Beach had implemented a threat assessment team using the best technology that could be made available to them through, for example, the TAPS Act, this individual, despite the fact they had access to an enormous amount of data, posthumously of course, would not have risen to the level of concern, which shows that trying to anticipate and predict these events is virtually impossible. If we then turn our attention to risk assessment as presented by Dr. Rose Marin in Massachusetts, gun grabber in chief, he wrote that even if we use the best risk assessment methods available, most predictions of violence would be wrong 9 out of 10 times. If we took that statistical analysis and we applied it to concealed carry permit holders, who, according to John Lott, commit 2.4 gun crimes per 100,000 permittees, we would find that under the best of circumstances, 5% of them would be wrongly predicted to commit violence. Given the preceding issues of bias, I think those numbers are considerably greater. Given all of this data, my conclusion is that instead of trying to predict extraordinarily rare events with technology that is wholly inadequate to the task, it is far better to eliminate gun-free zones. And remember, the first rule of gun safety is to keep your guns.
Hello, my name is Arthur Shavinda, and I'm the project director for Doctors for Responsible Gun Ownership. I'm pleased to speak to you in these strange and strained times. We are less than 2 months from the presidential election, and tensions in our country are not easing. The Biden campaign has indicated on its website that they plan to, quote, call for Congress to appropriate $50 million to accelerate research into the causes and prevention of gun violence at the CDC and NIH, end quote. The Biden website itemizes a Christmas wish list of gun control measures. It is clear that a Biden administration would use public health as a line of attack on the Second Amendment. DRGO's primary focus is countering this historically demonstrated disingenuous advocacy research which masquerades as a pursuit of public health and safety. Today, our leadership team will make presentations illustrating how DRGO implements its mission. For my part, I want to address a more nebulous tactic used by opponents of the right to keep and bear arms. For some time now, we've heard the argument that there is no place for, quote, weapons of war on American streets. Aside of historical record to the contrary, the truth is that the Second Amendment protects weapons of war, because the Second Amendment is about war. Its primary intent has nothing to do with putting meat on the table or rape prevention, although personal safety and food procurement are the most frequent benefits of the free exercise of the right to keep and bear arms. The Second Amendment is the essence of and the safeguard of liberty. A truly free country cannot exist unless the populace has a means to keep in check and counter the government's ambitions. And the ultimate form of that check is a parity of force. That is what the Second Amendment is about. Put crudely, it's our ultimate F no. When one comes to that realization, gun control is revealed to not as the pursuit of public safety, but as a usurpation of the ultimate political power of a free people. The gun rights community ought not shy away from making this point. It appeals to both ends of the political spectrum. At every opportunity, then, we should emphasize that the Second Amendment, 1, provides the ability to defend our country. 2, serves as an ultimate political check a people have over their government. And 3, as such, it is both a civil and a political right. Any attempt to curtail or abridge the exercise of that right is not just a civil rights violation. It is a strike at the fundamental balance of power upon which our country was founded. Now, I am not eager nor cavalier about using this very potent political power. Restraint should always be the guiding principle. We speak of defensive gun use in the face of aggression as the only morally legitimate use of guns. Similarly, any armed opposition to government tyranny is a last resort, after the vote and the courts fail to restore freedom. Nobody listening or watching should misconstrue what I'm saying as a legitimization of or an exhortation to violence of any kind, for any cause. What I am saying is that depriving the people who elected you of their ability to rein in your ambitions is not governing. It is nothing less than subjugation, and it must never be tolerated in a free society. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Dr. Robert Young, editor for Doctors for Responsible Gun Ownership, coming to you from the Adirondack Mountains. Evaluating so-called public health research on guns is DRGO's primary task. Well-funded career anti-gun academics work from the unstated prejudice that guns are bad, so restricting gun ownership is good. They pick and choose data that lean their way. They don't examine changes over time and favor confusing statistical methods that bolster the conclusion that guns cause violence. And they keep getting a pass. For example, in January, the CDC reported that school homicides skyrocketed from 2009 to 2018, while admitting that due to yearly fluctuations, the results did not reach significance. They implied these were the school massacres we all fear, but included any shooting death on or near school property of a student, an employee, or a family member. This is propaganda, not science. In February, pediatrics asserted that increased handgun ownership over 3 decades caused child deaths to skyrocket, but only during a single 10-year period, just in 1 to 4-year-olds, from 0.36 to 0.64 per 100,000 people. Not meaningful. The truth? They cherry-picked their study years. These deaths have been declining overall for decades. In March, Boston University School of Public Health published work showing that household gun ownership correlated with rates of firearm suicide by adolescents from 2005 through 2015. True, but it also correlated with all means of suicide and not with a rate of suicide attempts by all methods, meaning that household gun ownership is irrelevant to adolescent suicidal behaviors. Correlation does not prove causation. Also in March, another BU group claimed that more stringent gun laws reduced mass shootings from 1998 through 2015. This study was marred by broadly categorizing laws as just restrictive or permissive, with flawed estimates of household gun possession. Even then, they detected a negligible difference of 0.05 incidents per million people, or 1 for every 20 million. Garbage in, garbage out. An April preventive medicine study concluded that access to guns correlates with gun violence, but hostility and impulsivity correlated more strongly than mere gun access and presaging violence, which was defined as the mere thought of threatening someone, not doing anything. This was based on a one-time survey returned by 600-some high school students from 7 cities across the South, a tiny, self-reporting, extremely atypical group. A criminologist at Florida State, Gary Fleck's own school, argued in July that household gun ownership and concealed carry laws increase firearm homicide and mass shootings. But she too exaggerated what mass shootings are, used no objective controls or trend analysis, and somehow attributed the careful planning of mass shooters to the impulsivity she sees in all gun owners. Her results showed no relationship between any of these. But sometimes we win. A study may have surprising results, such as work from UC Davis's Anti-Gun Center from February on California's highly restrictive background checks from 1991 through 2005. The authors had to acknowledge that these checks made no difference in the rate of gun-related homicides or suicides. And there's Dr. Kalen Langman of McMaster's University, a DRGO expert. In June, he compared changes in Canadian firearm laws versus trends in suicide and homicide rates over 26 years, before and after increasingly restrictive legislation in 1991, 94, and 2001. And he chose meaningful comparisons, areas with high numbers for existing suicides, unemployment, poverty, and native population density. Each of these correlated with higher rates of homicide and suicide, not gun ownership. Science is supposed to be clear, logical, and objective. Unfortunately, it is as messy and ego-driven as any other human endeavor. Even though these studies actually show that neither gun ownership nor gun laws have anything to do with rates of suicide, homicide, mass shootings, or other violence, these researchers misstate their own results and never question their bias against guns. DRGO will continue calling out bad science in gun research and promoting the good. We're having some influence and hope that will grow. Thank you.
Hello, I'm Edwin Walker, partner in the Houston law firm of Walker & Taylor. We're the primary independent program attorneys for U.S. Law Shield, as well as being founding members of the American Council of Second Amendment Lawyers. I'd like to start by thanking the Second Amendment Foundation for inviting us once again to their great gun rights policy conference. I know that this year is a little unusual because it's online, and I would much rather be meeting everybody in person. Well, today I would like to speak with you about how law enforcement is using current laws to strip people of their Second Amendment rights. In particular, I would like to focus on one type of law, the rise of red flag extreme risk protective orders. In the last year or so, there's been an expansion of states implementing and using these laws. In general, these new laws are fundamentally defective because unlike most protective order cases where the state is required to prove specific instances of criminal conduct which threatens or puts others in danger, all these laws require is a showing of, quote, dangerousness without definition, limits, or qualifications as to what thought, speech, or act constitutes said danger. Further, many statutes provide no time limits as to what evidence can be considered by the court in making its decision to issue a red flag protective order, or whether or not the individual presents an immediate or imminent danger. The use of amorphous, undefined terms and conditions is where the fundamental problem in these laws lie, and it's where the police and prosecutors see their opportunity to stretch the boundaries of who these laws can be applied to. It is also important to note that one of the underlying dangers of this legal process, one which the police and prosecutors love, is that unlike a criminal trial where the burden of proof is the highest standard of beyond a reasonable doubt, these red flag protective orders can be obtained by simply meeting the lower legal standards of clear and convincing evidence, or by preponderance of the evidence. Now, which states have implemented these red flag protective order laws? Here's a list. Of course, it includes the usual suspects such as California, Connecticut, Massachusetts, New Jersey, and New York, but it also contains some states which have otherwise pro-gun laws, like Nevada, Indiana, and Florida. In fact, in my home state of Texas, where we have a reputation of being somewhat of a Second Amendment sanctuary, Beto notwithstanding, red flag bills have been filed in the last several legislative sessions, and the governor has ordered the Texas House and Senate to hold out-of-session hearings about the viability of such laws. I am sure that in the legislative session for 2021, the passage of a red flag protective order bill will be one of the anti-gun lobby's top priorities. So let's look at some examples of how these red flag laws have been enforced and exploited. In Florida, we saw where a red flag law was used in a very circular fashion to actually create its own criminal charge, wherein a conviction of the criminal charge will lead to an individual who resists the imposition of the order and will cause him to permanently lose his right to possess firearms forever. In this case, a man was charged with a crime. While the criminal charge was still an unproven allegation, and while he retained his presumption of innocence, the police got a judge to issue an ex parte red flag order to remove his firearms. When the police arrived, he refused to cooperate, and he invoked his Fourth and Fifth Amendment rights, believing that the law gave him the right to participate in a hearing before his guns were taken. Once he resisted the order, the police said, "Aha! You're violating the enforcement of this order, and that is a crime." This gave the prosecutors the ability to charge and convict him of this felony, all while the underlying criminal case that was the basis for granting the red flag order in the first place was still pending. As an interesting side note, this man had a Florida concealed handgun permit, which fact the prosecutors actually used against him by arguing it proved that he knew what the law was, even though he had pled ignorance of the red flag law's enforcement procedures. Also, we can see from the headlines on this PowerPoint of how Florida is very proud of how many times they have used this law since its inception. Next, in New Jersey, the state has frequently used the law to crack down on the limited number of people who have firearms, even in compliance with their already draconian gun laws. In one particular case, a man had a red flag protective order issued against him because he had made anti-Semitic statements online. While no one agrees with the content of his speech and appropriately view it as abhorrent and unacceptable, it's still protected by the First Amendment. We all remember that the First Amendment protects speech we detest because acceptable speech needs no protection. While there was no evidence that he had actually threatened a specific individual or engaged in dangerous or threatening conduct, this was speech alone, remember, the state sought and obtained from a judge an order to confiscate his firearms and ammunition. This case sets a dangerous precedent for showing that the police and prosecutors stand ready and willing to use speech alone, even non-specific online rants, to take away your Second Amendment rights. One of the few limitations that these red flag petitions generally have is they can only be filed by individuals who are closely related to the person against whom the order is sought: spouses, parents, children, and members of the same household. However, one huge exception to this is the ability of police to use them. In Massachusetts, the police are enthusiastically embracing their newfound power. In an article entitled "Rarely Used Red Flag Law Seen as Another Useful Tool for Police to Take Guns," there's some very chilling language. The article states, quote, "Police chiefs have long been able to seize someone's guns through other provisions of the state's strong gun control laws. But with the red flag law, some officers said a litany of hurdles are cleared faster, allowing them to take guns and mitigate risks with less delay. Advocates for the law said this is a good thing," end quote. Constitutional protections be damned. It's a good thing. While the limitation on who can file for a red flag protective order exists in the current law, as we are all aware, many of these laws are the slipperiest of slippery slopes. In California, they have already expanded their law to allow employers, co-workers, and teachers to have standing as applicants to take away a person's firearms. Additionally, a California red flag order can now last an unprecedented 5 years. One can easily imagine the potential for abuse and false allegations made by Karen at work who's been out to get you since the week after you started your job. If the list of people who have the right to claim a person is dangerous enough to be stripped of their constitutional right to possess a firearm has now expanded to include the police, current and former family members, current and former roommates, employers, co-workers, and teachers, at what point will it become the cashier you argued with because you were having a bad day and he shorted you in your change? Or the waitress who overheard you arguing with your spouse or disciplining your children? The possibilities are endless. What about these two kids in Colorado, which has a red flag law, who, in 2 separate instances, were recently suspended from their online schools because a teacher saw that they had toy guns in their toy collection? Could they have their right to possess firearms taken away before they even became old enough to have the capacity to own a gun? And what about their parents? Does the fact that they have allowed their kids to have toy guns provide sufficient evidence of their dangerousness that it could curtail their Second Amendment rights? Even though red flag protective orders are processes of state-specific jurisdiction, the U.S. Congress believes that the federal government has a role to play in the surreptitious stripping of Second Amendment rights. This is a list of bills that are currently pending in the 116th Congress, which either create a federal red flag extreme risk protective order procedure or incentivizes states to pass their own red flag laws. Of particular interest is H.R. 5717 and its Senate companion, Senate Bill 3254, which I encourage you to read because unfortunately these bills may be a harbinger of what is to come. These 2 bills are basically a wish list of every gun prohibition and restriction that has ever been proposed. In addition to extreme risk protective orders, they also include an assault weapons ban, outlawing suppressors, firearms ownership licensing, prohibiting private sales, as well as an oppressive excise tax on the sale of firearms and ammunition. The good news is that all of these bills will die at the end of this congressional term. The bad news is that they will be filed once again in January when the 117th Congress begins. And that is why the Second Amendment is now a litmus test issue for every candidate in the November election. And we must ensure that only politicians who support our constitutional right to keep and bear arms are elected. Again, I want to thank you for listening to me today, and remember to get out the vote.
Joe Tartaro was a longtime editor of Gun Week and then the gunmag.com, which became its successor both online and in print. Joe was a fine editor, one of the best I ever worked with, and I miss him a lot. He was a mentor to a lot of people. He meant a great deal to so many in the gun rights movement because he was a veritable walking encyclopedia of gun legislation and the history of the gun rights movement dating back decades. in his wake, he has left a lot of admirers, and we've got some today. We're going to share some thoughts with you about what Joe Tartarow meant to the firearms community, and I think what he may continue to mean in the years ahead, because there's never going to be another Joe Tartarow. He really carved a lot of trail. He made it possible for other gun writers, for other gun examiners, for people in the firearms community to write and express what they thought without fear of contradiction, because the facts were always on Joe's side. He never once wavered in that. He was devoted to the First Amendment as well as the Second. And I think that in the final analysis, what Joe Tartarow did was he made the ground safe for the rest of us to walk on as journalists.
My name is Masad Ayub. I'd like to talk to you for a couple of minutes about an old friend and mentor, Joe Tartarow. We lost Joe in June of 2020. He was 89 years old and still working virtually full-time at what was his life's passion, gun owners' civil rights. I first met him in the latter 1970s at a Second Amendment Foundation meeting. And at that point, he had already become one of the prime movers in the Cincinnati Revolt, the change in leadership in the National Rifle Association that broadened it beyond its previous focus on firearm safety training and organized shooting competition, maintaining those functions but transforming it into what today is generally recognized as the most powerful grassroots lobby in Washington, D.C. Joe reached down to the grassroots. He was a pioneer in the Gun Rights Policy Conference, bringing together people from all the different states to share with one another the strategies that had worked in their jurisdictions to take back gun owners' civil rights the way they have been taken from them by the prohibitionists, one step at a time. As president of Second Amendment Foundation, he led that organization to its leadership today in promoting case law at the highest court levels, the Heller case, the McDonald case, that have restored and clarified individuals' rights to keep and bear arms. As a person, Joe was a brilliant man. He was really a walking encyclopedia of the history of gun owners' civil rights, going all the way back to the time of the Founding Fathers. But as a person, the single word those who knew him most often used to describe him was kind. He was a loyal man, married for 63, 65 years to his late wife, Pat. He was a man who encouraged youth, was extremely patient. In a time really before celebrate diversity became a phrase, he lived that. Joe brought the LGBTQ movement into our sphere. Women and Guns magazine. He worked much to bring in youth. In essence, he's a man whose shoes I don't think can ever be filled. But I think all of us need to follow his model, follow the tradition, follow the path that he created for the Second Amendment Foundation. Thank you for coming. Carry on the legacy.
This recording is made for the 2020 Gun Rights Policy Conference. This is Richard Feldman, President of the Independent Firearm Owners Association. I met Joe Tartarow back in 1984 when I was an NRA state liaison for the Northeast. My first trip in August of that year had me going up to Buffalo to do a grading session with the Coalition of New York Sportsmen. There I met Joe Tartarow, some other members of SCOPE, and other folks from New York State. I was warned before I left to be careful what I said around Joe Tartarow because he was with the other side. Well, at the time, there were many fights going on between Neil Knox and Harlan Carter, And being a newbie on the block, I took their advice. After all, I worked for them. It took me the better part of a year to figure out that if Joe Tartaro was the enemy, what I needed to be successful was to surround myself with enemies like Joe Tartaro. Over the many years, Joe has provided, not just me, but almost everyone in the movement, great advice. He's been an ear, been available to help us move this issue forward. We've achieved so much, and there's still so much to do. And Joe, we sure miss you very much today. I miss your advice. I miss those phone calls. I would hardly ever do anything when I ran the Firearm Industries Association without checking with Joe and seeing if there was something I was missing. Didn't always listen to his advice, but I always wanted to get it in advance. Joe had an agenda. His agenda was the preservation and protection of our Second Amendment freedoms. And in pushing that agenda, he was willing to work with just about anyone on our side. And in fact, he generally did. If anyone said to me, they didn't like Joe Tartaro, that was enough for me to figure out there's something wrong with them. Everybody liked Joe. Everybody worth knowing. Everybody worth working with. And he will be sorely missed. He already is. You know, if there's many people in this movement, many good people in this movement, but there are few friends over the many years that'll stick with you, right or wrong. He's been an ally. He's been a hero. He's been a supporter. But most of all, he's been my friend. I miss you, Joe, more than ever. Godspeed. Rest in peace.
Hi, I'm Tanya Metaxa. I first met Joe Tartaro in the early 1970s. He ran an advertising agency in Buffalo, New York, and I was a pro-gun activist from Connecticut. I had been active in the 1970 elections for governor and U.S. senator and was invited to a Second Amendment group that included people from the New England states as well as New York, and Joe was part of the group. He was easy to get along with, and we became friends. In 1976, I was hired by the brand new NRA Institute for Legislative Action to manage a campaign against a Massachusetts referendum that would have banned private ownership of handguns. Knowing Joe's advertising background, I hired him to help develop advertising for that campaign. Thanks to our collaboration, we were successful and we won. My success in Massachusetts led to a full-time job at NRA ILA in 1977, and our paths again crossed during the rancorous NRA meeting in Cincinnati that year, and during my 3-year tenure at NRA, we kept in touch. Additionally, my husband George and I were one of the original investors in the pro-gun newspaper Gun Week when Joe became its editor-owner. Many of the staff at NRA ILA in those early years were influenced by Joe's steady and wise advice, not only in the advertising arena, but also in the area of Second Amendment public relations. His knowledgeable leadership at Gun Week certainly was the reason that it became a very valuable information source to gun owners across the country. Today, it's hard to understand how information was communicated in the days before computers, the internet, and smartphones. But Joe was an expert in newspapers and magazines. For me, Joe Tartaro was foremost a friend and an ally in the struggle to keep our gun rights, and as many of you in this fight know so well, having a friend who you know will watch your back, as well as understand the nuances of the struggle is and was a blessing. I could bounce off him ideas without fear of ridicule, or worry of having a silly idea broadcast to the world. After I retired from NRA, I suggested to Joe that a column on legislative activities, especially at the state level, might be a worthwhile addition to Gun Week. In his usual low-key manner, he said, "Why don't you do it?" Thus, a new collaboration was born. He was an excellent editor, making suggestions that always made the product better. When he retired, I, for one, certainly missed his quiet guidance. Thanks for the coaching, the support, the friendship, Joe. I miss you. God bless you, and thank you.
With the passing of Joe Tartarow, the Second Amendment Foundation and the gun rights movement lost probably its best friend and a key important cog in our machine. Joe, to me, was not only a personal friend, but he was a mentor. He was always there when I had to bounce something off somebody to find out if it was a good idea or a bad idea. Joe, in fact, helped many, many people in the gun rights movement and never took any credit for what he did. I mean, there isn't anybody that he hasn't helped who needed help in the cause. Came up with multiple ideas and ways and things of how we should operate to expand our movement, to make us sound more legitimate, more powerful, and quite frankly, a whole lot more intellectual than we were giving credit for. We were going to miss Joe very, very much. I don't think there's anybody who could replace him. I got to know Joe way back before he became president of the Second Amendment Foundation, when he was very involved with NRA politics and the revolt at Cincinnati, and had a giant change on how that organization operated and ran in the future. In fact, Joe wrote a pamphlet book on the revolt at Cincinnati and autographed it to me, thanking me because it was the Citizens Committee for the Right to Keep and Bear Arms that was a forerunner to NRA ILA. And if NRA ILA, if we didn't start doing what they were doing, they never would have started to exist to begin with. And it meant a whole lot to me. I still have a copy of that on my bookshelf. There are many things on my bookshelf that Joe Tartarow wrote and many things that Joe Tartarow mentored me with that are very precious. But his loss to us is very, very hurtful to the cause and to a lot of his friends and people that he worked with over the years. The Second Amendment Foundation is starting what we call the Gun Rights Hall of Fame, and Mr. Joe Tartarow is going to be our first inductee.
Hello, everybody. I'm happy to be with you, even in this virtual world, to share some memories of my dad, Joseph Tartarow, who passed suddenly in June. On behalf of my brother Mark and my sister Bridget, I'd like to thank you all for your outpouring of love and support. Dad was active and in the fight up until the end. In fact, a week before he went into the hospital, he was still talking to reporters about things like the NRA. And he was still working on ads for the Second Amendment Foundation and plans to reboot our urban outreach initiative. Those kinds of things were near and dear to Dad's heart, not so much talking about the past, but going into the future and seeing that as many people as we could get were involved in the gun rights struggle. He was active in not just the urban outreach program, but also a mover and a shaker with women and guns, rescuing it when a couple months after it was starting to fail. And he was the power behind the throne at women and guns until we turned it over to the capable hands of Robin and the Girl in a Gun crew. Dad was passionate about including everybody in the debate, and I know many of you who attended live gun rights policy conferences probably remember talking to him outside while he was having a smoke. He would talk to anybody about anything, but gun rights was his passion. He was a steadfast and steady presence for everybody at the foundation, but everybody in the wider gun movement. He made friends easily and he shed enemies quickly. If you were on our side on this fight, you were on our side forever. Again, I want to thank you all for your expressions when Dad passed, and we hope to continue his legacy. Thanks.